たに彼女合わせたことを私今も悔やんでいる。二人はしかし感じてた昼下がりのキャフェテラス。あの日電話が不意になったの。あの人と別れてと彼女からI can't stop the loneliness どうしてなの悲しみが止まらない誤解だよってあなたは笑うだけどキスは嘘の匂い抱きしめられて気づいたの。愛がここにないこと。恋は小さな嵐みたいに友達も恋人も奪ってI can't stop the loneliness 彼を返して悲しみが止まらない誰か助けて悲しみが止まらない I can't stop the loneliness こられきれす悲しみが止まらない I can't stop the loneliness どうしてなの悲しみが止まらないThe skyscrapers fall silver to gold The countdown begins in Tokyo 27 days along is 20 million ways to go without I'm in a reckless fever Love struck her like this her But I never leave her Like the top economy surge
Ba 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 beep bop. Da da ba da ba 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 ba. Hello, everyone. We are halfway through the week. My throat continues to fight me and be my biggest enemy. Hello. Hello, hi Texan, hi Knives, hi Chunky, hi hello lurkers. Hello everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful Wednesday. Hope you guys have had a great week thus far. Hope you've been wonderful. You finished Das Finale, all of them? Damn, you're ahead of me. I haven't even finished Das Finales yet. I haven't started Moto Moto Love yet either. You binged that shit? Hell yeah, I'm proud of you. That shit's like I kind of want to binge it. Did you watch the movie too? Not yet? Okay, movie's good. Movie's very good. Movie's very fun, actually. Oh, you also get to meet Alice, who's a doll. She's a sweetheart. Anchovy OVA, good choice. Anchovy OVA is good. Actually, all the OVAs are pretty much good. I can't remember any of them that aren't good. I liked all the OVAs. They're pretty fantastic. How's everyone doing? How has everyone's day been? And if you're still going through your day at work, how's that going? I hope it's not too ass. If it's too ass, sorry. Takiyaki or Tayaki. I'll see if I can't help you with that after stream. Just remind me, okay? Well, I'll talk to my dealer, aka the one of my friends is a huge Girls in Panzer fan, way bigger than I am. Like, he can name the tanks and shit. So I'll talk to him after stream and see if I can point you in the right direction. Yes. Work's the biggest ass. Damn. The biggest ass, but not even the fattest. Ain't that a damn diddly shame? As usual on Wednesdays, which I'm pretty sure we kind of have our weeks designated at this point. Like, Wednesday, we've been watching YouTube videos. Thursday, we've been doodling. We have our bigger than my personality. I don't know. That's pretty big. Oh, I just sent my fucking earbud flying. Yeah, we have our weeks fucking planned out most of the time, right? Not as big as his ego. Buddy, if only you knew how big my ego really was. And by big, I mean tiny. My ego is fucking minuscule. I tell you guys, I'm a fake demon. I have some cherry Gatorade right here. I'm taking a big fat sip and I'm loving it. Speaking of egos, you got a small ego? Yeah. She's building it up. She is. And now, I don't know, Knives, it's getting like, you know, when you get a pet, like you get a dog or something, and you get it like a tiny collar. That's what it feels like you've done. And you're like trying to like reel me in, but progressively the dog's getting bigger. And it's getting harder and harder to control it. That's what I feel like is happening. I feel like soon enough I'm gonna be out of control. You're not gonna be able to reel me back in. She's boosting me up too much. She's trying to build my confidence. Maybe like in a year or so, I'm gonna be the cockiest motherfucker you've ever heard of, and this time it'll be genuine, not just me playing it up. Speaking of playing it up, you guys should go play up the video and the short that I've been uploading. Hopefully, I'm doing well. Corned beef, hello, corned beef. That's another thing I was meaning to do. I need to figure out how to fix chat so everyone pops up, not just a few people here and there. Excuse me. If you guys want to go check out like the TikTok and the YouTube and stuff, and go, check out that stuff. I'm trying to, trying to provide content elsewhere. You like me? Mean like me being shadow banned? Yeah, I don't know what that's about. I'm sure I could probably fix that. I just don't know how. So, like the little chat bubbles you see when other people type. Excuse me. I had to like code that through like HTML, and I don't know HTML, so I had to use guides online. And I'm wondering if it's like something I did in the coding that fucked it up. Hi, Chance. Welcome in. Yeah, I'm wondering if it's something I did on coding that made it so only like there is an error somewhere where people can just not. Is that Neuro? That is Neuro. HTML JSON reminds me of the late 90s. Well, thankfully the late 90s for me was like my 60s. My 50s, sorry. Did my math wrong. Yeah, so the coding to get these things. Oh, it's the hype train emotes. I need to get more emotes. Playing Gen Z pisser. I don't know who had a Gen Z even else. What do we got? I got a couple videos for you guys today. Shut up. I got some racing. I got some bankrupt, and I got some defunct land. The big three, as they call them. So I'm hoping we got some good ones in you good ones in you, if you're so lucky. Good ones in here for you today. Mount Rushmore of video essays. True. Racing, not just NASCAR, just motorsports. Bankruptcy and defunct land. Wendigoon would be up here if there was a fourth. Motorsports always has good video essays though. So there are so many videos nowadays where I'm like, this would be perfect to listen to at work, or this would be perfect dinner and YouTube video. But now I put it on my watch later because every Wednesday we just watch them, you know? Yeah, there are 4 faces on Mount Rushmore. That's what I said. Yeah, motorsports, bankruptcy, defunct land, and then if there was a 4th video today is what I meant. If there's a 4th video today, there would be Wendigoon. And if we could add like an honorable mention, it would be like natural disasters. That would be also a good one. So like tornadoes, hurricanes, stuff like that. That would be an honorable mention. I don't know who I'd bump out. Seed butter. Seed butter's fucking really good. Oh shit, now we gotta come up with like a fucking iceberg of watch later content, or not an iceberg, like a Mount Rushmore of watch later content. It would be like iceberg videos, video essays, intense analysis about something that really doesn't matter, and lost media. It would have to be something like that. But we'll go into the first one. This one was uploaded, I think this is the most recent one. Oh, definitely the most recent one. This was by, hold on. Put some bodybuilding channels up there. They're really interesting. I would like to see that. I have not watched any bodybuilding content like that before. Or I have not watched any content around bodybuilding. That would be, some really good stuff like that. So if you want to pop that somewhere on the Discord if you're in it, that would be pretty interesting. Well, let me pop into the corner here. This first one, the NASCAR Championship nobody wanted to win, by Jake Sim Racing. This is the most recent one, with 2 days ago, going on 3 days ago now. All right, everybody sit down, get comfortable, get your drinks, get your snacks, and lock in, please. Minecraft ARGs with cryptic titles. I'd say video game or ARGs in general are probably pretty good up there. Minecraft probably is its own category at this point. All right. Is this a submission channel? You got like 12 of them? No, I have a submission channel. I just have like a bajillion threads. So if you want, there's a video sharing channel if you want to just pop a video in without the stream thing going on, you know? The submission channel's for specific streams, which is why I put threads in it. But if you just want to share videos, there is a submission, or there's a video sharing channel. Anyway, the NASCAR Championship. Nobody wanted to win by Jake Sim Racing.
For most of NASCAR history, the battle for the year-end points champion was pretty straightforward.
Look at all
Some
those
drivers
trophies,
were dominant
baby.
enough to lock up the title early. Some seasons came down to a duel between two drivers, and some
Greatest
battles,
season
like the
ever
famous
made.
1992
The greatest,
title
one of the
race,
greatest
which
seasons,
saw
I should say.
6 drivers still in contention in the final race at Atlanta,
1992,
will
I
forever
believe.
live on for race fans. Unfortunately, with the playoff format set in stone, it's unlikely we'll ever see a full season points race again. At the turn of the millennium, many seasons
unfortunately.
were dominated by a single driver, and the titles were claimed with races to spare. But sandwiched in between Jeff Gordon's triumph in 2001 and Matt Kenseth's consistent 2003 title is NASCAR's strangest ever championship.
2002, really?
A battle which seemed to get more strange as the season progressed.
For some
A
reason.
championship that no one seemed to want to win. A season that completely changed the course of NASCAR.
All right. For some reason, I thought this was
2002 NASCAR Winston Cup.
Yeah, I thought 2002 was
We should
more
have seen the warning signs in the Daytona 500.
competitive, but I'd never
Rookie Jimmy
watched
Johnson
2002 all the
qualified
way
on the
through,
pole.
obviously.
I mean, he is
that was before I
driving a
started
Hendrick
watching
car, so you know
NASCAR.
it's well prepared. And his crew chief Chad Knaus put together some fast dodges at restrictor plate races the year prior for Stacey Compton. But in hindsight, the 48 team's real full-time debut in Winston Cup was a harbinger of things to come.
2002.
While Johnson and Daytona 500 rookie Kevin Harvick made a good start to the race, the same could not be said for one Tony Stewart.
Hi, Tony.
Stewart had arrived
Hi,
in
Tony
Winston
Stewart.
Cup in 1999 and instantly was a threat to win races. He had a strong finish to the 2001 season and was seen as a true title contender in 2002. However, after a lap and a half, the Home Depot Pontiac had its engine let go, and Stewart was left to exit Daytona with a 43rd place finish.
He finished the
The
last
race
so many
progressed, and
times in the
expected
Daytona
favorites of
500. It's
Michael Waltrip and
it's
Dale Earnhardt Jr.
it's
hit trouble,
unfair. That
leaving the
race
door
was
open
so
for Jeff
unkind to
Gordon
him.
and Sterling Marlin to battle it out late in the race. At this point, what couldn't you say about Jeff Gordon? He had won 4 of the last 7 Winston Cup titles, and in 2 of the seasons he didn't win the title, he won 10 and 7 races respectively. It was efficient domination that excited his fans and pissed off pretty much everyone else. Sterling Marlin, on the other hand,
So back in the day, back when I started watching racing around 2007, I fucking hated Jeff Gordon. And then looking back, it was just I hated Jeff Gordon because he was so good. I hated Jeff Gordon because he was so good. And also, like, I don't know, sometimes for some reason I have beef with like Rick Hendrick drivers. But like Jeff Gordon is just like a chill dude. He doesn't do anything bad. He's not a reckless driver. He's just super talented. But for some reason I just fucking hated him back when he was driving.
had endured some trying seasons as of late. After winning 2 Daytona 500s and finishing high up in the points in 1995 and 1996 with the Morgan McClure Kodak car, Sterling had a dismal 1997, which led to a move to Felix Sabates' team in 1998.
That is a
This
colorful
did
ass
not
car.
yield any notable results, but he finished top 20 in the points every year through 2000, but with no wins. However, his fortunes changed in a huge way
Oh,
in
that
2001.
beautiful,
Not
mwah,
only
that
did the team
Coors
switch from
Light
Chevy to
car.
the returning Dodge, but dominant kart owner Chip Ganassi bought a majority stake in the team. The 40 cars suddenly found themselves in the top 5 in points by the end of 2001, and their 2002 got off to a great start. On a late restart in the Daytona 500, the field stacked up and crashed further back. Marlin had laid back and tried to get a run on Gordon, which worked. In the days before green-white checkers, the race back to the line might have been the finish of the race. Marlin's gamble to lay back did pay off, and he got a huge run on Gordon out of the tri-oval. Jeff was late to
Moves
throw a
his ass
block
up.
and spun himself when Sterling rightfully refused to
Oh.
be forced underneath the yellow line. Marlin made it back to the caution first.
Oh my
and
God, I
NASCAR
forgot about
immediately
this.
Threw a red flag and stopped everyone on the backstretch. That's when Marlin got out of his car and started pulling on his right front fender, which was damaged and was probably going to cause a tire rub when the race restarted. In the immortal words of the late Benny Parsons,
Sterling Marlin is jumping out of his car. He's going around to look at the right front fender. But, oh, he can't do that.
Sterling was black flagged, which handed the lead to eventual
I-
winner Ward Burton. Still, the 40 team bagged.
I
the top 10
love the
and
fact
took
that he
momentum
did that.
forward.
It's so stupid.
After running afoul of officiating
Like, you
in
just
Daytona,
think that you've seen
it came back
everything
the
in
40 team's
sports,
way 2
right?
weeks later at Las
And then a
Vegas.
motherfucker gets out of his
During the
car
green flag
in the
stop,
middle of a race. He's
Sterling
like, hold on,
spun,
let me
entered
work
the
on my
pits,
car real
and
quick.
broke the pit speed limit. However, race control failed to notify the team due to communications outages, so the penalty was just waved off. Marlin went on to win, and having 3 straight finishes up front put him in the points lead. If they kept this speed up all season, he'd be a real championship contender. After the summary of the craziness that was the Daytona 500, I felt that this is the point where I want to talk about the underlying reason that made the 2002 season so unique compared to the seasons before and seasons
Because all the
after.
cars look damn
A
fucking
genuine
good.
and
That's
tangible
why.
changing of the guard played out across all 36 races. On one hand, you had the veterans, some towards the end of their careers, and on the other, a group of guys who would come to be the headliners well into the 2010s. Let's set the stage for the cast of heroes.
It's
and
wild how many drivers
group
in
consisted
the
of
early
Sterling
thousands
Marlin,
ended up being the
Dale
face of the
Jarrett,
sport.
Ricky Rudd, Rusty
Well, a lot of
Wallace,
guys were
Bill
on their way
Elliott,
out.
And despite his relative youth compared to those guys, Jeff Gordon.
Yeah.
2002 was really the final year where Jarrett and Rudd were still real threats pretty much every week. In the summer stretch, Rudd was quick every week at Pocono and Dover, but was unlucky not to win. Then at Sonoma, the tides turned, and Rudd cashed in on the heartbreaking DNF from Jerry Nadeau in the Petty 44 in the closing laps. It would be Rudd's final NASCAR Winston Cup win. He left for the Wood Brothers at season's end, and the fall Richmond race was notable for Rudd, getting into a fight with Yates engine builder Larry Lackey. Despite still being competitive,
never heard of that.
Robert Yates Racing was starting to lose steam. Jarrett had won at Pocono in Michigan, but there was a slight slide. He had finished in the top 5 in points for 6 straight seasons, but in 2002 he only finished 9th. This minor slide could not have led anyone to predict a brutal 2003 where DJ finished a dismal 26th in points after winning the second race of the season in Rockingham.
I forgot he
Bill Elliott
he
had seen
won
a career
that like
renaissance after
late
moving
into
to
his
Ray
career.
Abraham's team in 2001.
Like I know his last
Fun
win,
fact,
but like I can't
the first
remember it
Cup race
being
I ever
that.
attended was
way.
that Homestead race.
Hello,
where
my
Elliott broke his
favorite
horrendous
lemon
winless
fan
streak.
boy. Hello, my
It was a
favorite
popular win.
Nick
They looked
Ramos.
to carry that momentum into 2002. The Evernham cars were super quick, but lacked consistency over
Hope
the
you're doing
season.
well.
The Dodges were very strong on flat tracks.
We were
and
watching
Bill scored back-to-back
the
wins
championship
during
that
the
no one
summer
wanted to
stretch at
win, the
Pocono
2002
and in the
NASCAR
Brickyard
Winston Cup
400 at
Championship.
Indianapolis. To win that race, Elliott had to make a late race pass on Rusty Wallace. Wallace himself was beginning to be mired in a winless drought. After winning at Fontana in April
get some
2001, Wallace wasn't banking his usual.
God, that
wins.
number 2, the Blue
Surely
Deuce,
he'd win
baby,
at
that's
Bristol or
hot
Richmond.
shit.
He
That's
was
such a
short track
nice
master
car.
After all, unfortunately, he narrowly missed out on both. The fall Richmond race saw Rusty run down the race leader late, only to have his right front let go and put an end to his charge. This is often forgotten, considering the diabolical way the Bristol race ended just a month prior. Rusty, as usual, found himself leading late at Bristol, but his own personal nemesis was on the attack.
Oh,
Surprisingly,
Jeff.
Gordon was on a 31 race winless streak. The
3
guy who
stream
regularly won
streak. Let's
double-digit
go.
races
He's
in a
streaking in
season
chat.
had made it to August 2002 without a win. These two obviously butted heads on short tracks, with a rash of incidents at Bristol and Richmond over the past several seasons. And with 3 laps to go, Gordon laid the bumper to Rusty and snuck on
pushed
by
him
to
out of the
claim
way.
victory. Jeff celebrated, and Rusty was left to ponder what could have been. Rusty's winless streak stretched into 2004, finally ending at a Martinsville race in which Gordon's dominant car was ended by a piece of asphalt breaking apart and getting lodged in the fender of the 24 car. Jeff and Rusty were always in some way connected at those short tracks. While the veterans went down swinging, a new crop of characters were
It's
joining
why I don't know
Columbus.
why it's so wild to think about,
The early
because Rusty
2000s
Wallace
were
was
marked by young
obviously
drivers
very
getting rides
prevalent
in
in the
top
90s.
teams,
But
with
it's just
Carl
wild to
Anderson
think
and the
about that.
success of Jeff
Jeff
Gordon, they
Gordon
looked to
had
emulate
such a
that.
rivalry with him.
Tony Stewart signed with Gibbs in
Hi, Tony.
1999. Dale Jr. and Matt Kenseth arrived in 2000. Kurt Busch made the jump from trucks to Cup in 2001. And Kevin Harvick was forced to speed up his rush to Cup in the wake of the 2001 Daytona 500. But no season highlighted this trend like 2002. After Jeremy Mayfield had a falling out with Penske Racing, the captain needed his replacement in the 12 car, and the choice was a slam dunk. Like Gordon and Stewart
Ryan
before him,
Newman.
Indiana USAC driver Ryan Newman made the switch to stock cars. It was plucked immediately by Roger Penske. Penske wasted no time in putting Newman in the big leagues, running a part-time.
I
Arco Busch
loved
Eagle
that
Cup
all-tell
schedule in
car, man.
2001.
It was
Newman,
just,
with little
it looked
experience,
so
finished fifth at
good.
Michigan and second in Kansas in 2001 in the Cup Series.
And that
He for sure had a
O2,
great
I
team,
forgot about
but
the
he was
O2
on it
car.
from day one. Newman was quick every week, but made his first big impact in the 2002 All-Star race, transferring in from the Open and eventually winning the whole thing.
Yeah.
Speaking of young drivers with great teams, we only have
I
to
wonder
look
if this
across
guy
to
ever
Newman's
went
Rookie
anywhere.
of the year rival, Jimmy Johnson. Johnson had made a name for himself off-roading out west before being nudged towards the stock car route by Chevrolet. After winning a few ASA races, Johnson drove for Herzog Motorsports in the
It is wild to me, the career trajectory of Jimmy Johnson. Because, you know, there were so many of, like, can't miss products in NASCAR history. Or can't miss prospects, excuse me. And Jimmy Johnson was not one of them. Jimmy Johnson just... It's ridiculous how his career ended up. He had all the makings of not being a superstar, and then he ends up being one of the greatest to ever do it.
Busch Series for a few seasons, winning a lone race at Chicagoland in 2001. But the performance that turned the tide came in a Busch race at Michigan in 2000. At this time, Jeff Gordon still ran Busch races with his own team, and in that Michigan race, he found himself impressed with the driver of the 92 car. Gordon knew that Hendrick Motorsports was finally starting a fourth team, but he also knew that Johnson was backed by Chevy, and none of the other possible candidates moved the needle that much. When they secured sponsorship from Lowe's, the 48 team was assembled. They got Chad Knaus, a former member of the Rainbow Warriors, as his crew chief. They got all of the equipment from the 24 team, which had just won the title in 2001. They were set for success, but after Johnson's unspectacular Busch Series career, no one could have predicted the level they'd eventually hit. Johnson took his first win at his home track of Fontana early on, and backed it up a few weeks later by winning at Dover, which would come to be his best track over the course of his career.
God, that
While
motherfucker was
Newman and Johnson were
unstoppable.
both super professional and mostly kept a cool head, Kurt Busch was a little different. His 2001 rookie campaign was rough, but he had plenty of talent. He could also be a hothead, but was willing to stand his ground and not be pushed around by the veterans. At the spring Bristol race, he scored his first
I
career
have
win
that
by
car
refusing to
somewhere.
let
The
Jimmy
Sharpie
Spencer
car? I
pass.
have that diecast. I wonder if I
Spencer
have
did
it on
make the
my...
pass, but Kurt
at
just
the
roughed him
meringue
up to
pad
get back
right
in
now.
front. Spencer was unable to run him back down, and the 97 car made its first trip to victory lane. While this was round number 2 of 4 in the on-track Kurt versus Jimmy Spencer feud, Kurt proved he could win and compete at the front, and put 2001 behind him. But Kurt was not the only young Roush driver looking to put 2001 in their rear view. Matt Kenseth had risen up the ranks with Robbie Reiser in the Busch Series before their entire operation was brought under the Roush Racing banner in the Cup Series for 2000. He,
Matt
like David
Kenseth.
Pearson,
I
Jeff
wish
Gordon,
Matt
and Bobby
Kenseth got
Labonte
more love.
before
He
him,
deserves
scored his
way
first
more
career
love
win
than
in
he
the Coke
gets.
600 that season. However, 2001 was a step backwards. Roush as a whole had a rough go of it that year. But 2002 was a bounce-back year for them, and Kenseth proved it, leading the series in wins with 5, winning early and often. However, the 17 team lacked the consistency that they would eventually have in 2003 to make a run at the 2002 crown. At this point, there's one contender I haven't touched on. I've spoken about Sterling Marlin, Tony Stewart, Jeff Gordon, the other vets like
Jimmy
Rusty and
Johnson,
DJ, the
Rusty
Rookie of the Year
DJ,
class of Newman and
Dale
Johnson.
Jr.
But one guy snuck his way into title contention in 2002. He, of all people, somehow flew under
No, I
the
mentioned
radar.
Dale Jr.
Coming into 2001,
Mark
Martin finished in the
Martin.
top
Oh my
10
God, my
for 12
man.
straight seasons, most of them well inside the top 5. He had finished runner-up in the points 3 times in that span. He had won a large number of races in the decade before. Mark and Roush had the misfortune of running into 2 juggernauts, early 90s Dale Earnhardt
And
late
then
90s
Jeff Gordon. Yep.
It seemed like he would never win a title. 2001 didn't do much to dispel that either, as he finished a distant 12th in points and failed to win a race. At 45 years old, many began to question how much longer he would be able to compete at the top level of the sport.
If only they
Anyone
knew.
who knows Mark
only
Martin
they knew.
knows he was incredibly relentless when overcoming adversity and had a fitness regimen.
I feel like
that
Mark
kept him in better
Martin's
shape
always been
than
old.
nearly all of his competitors.
Granted, I started watching in
With the new crew chief
2007,
in
but Mark
2002,
Martin was
Mark
always just
consistent
like
for most of the
an
season
older guy.
and scored a popular win in the Coca-Cola 600. With the main characters of this story established, let's take you to the turning point of the entire season. This is how the point standings looked heading into race number 26 of 36. Sterling Marlin had led the points since Rockingham, and his lead had held steady at around a 100-point gap for most of the season to this point. However, Jeff Gordon had just won the last 2 races and catapulted himself into second in points, just 91 back of the 40 car. The fall Richmond race, race number 26, would blow the championship race wide open. On just the 8th lap of the race, a multi-car accident in turn 3 claimed several drivers, one of which being Marlin, who went head-on in the wall, which I'm sure hurt more than he let on. With Marlin finishing dead last, this opened the door for Gordon to capitalize with another strong finish. However, uncharacteristically, the Hendrick engine in the 24 car gave out, leaving Jeff to wonder what might have been. Mark Martin finished 6th and Jimmie Johnson 13th, both of them leapfrogging Gordon in the standings. But after this race, with Sterling finishing last, Gordon technically gained ground.
There's only
But now the gap from first to fourth
9
was
races
82
left.
points, when the gap was 91 back to second. And
Man, if only we had a fucking
it
full
had
race
looked like
format
Sterling would have
now.
been able to point race his way to the title, but Richmond put an end to all that. We had a real battle on our hands now. Race 27 the next week at Loudon saw an interesting race that had Johnny Benson narrowly miss out on his first Cup win, being passed by Ryan Newman before the race ended early. However, the 40 team struggled along to a 21st place finish, and Sterling officially lost the points lead. However, Johnson finished 9th, Gordon 14th, and Mark 16th, so it wasn't catastrophic.
Man.
However, third
I
place
just
finisher
don't
Tony Stewart had
get-
brought himself genuinely into
Wait,
the title battle.
wait. So it's Martin, Marlin, Johnson, Stewart, Gordon, Wallace, Elliott, Newman, Kenseth. I can't believe Elliott was running this well that late in his career. I mean, he was just about out of his full-time ride. What, a couple of years later, if that? Damn, I didn't know he went that long because he was racing. You know, he was fucking $1 million bill back in the fucking 80s, you know? Jesus, he was going for a while. So is Martin too, though. Like a lot of these guys, it's a real changing of the guard this season. Like he said, you know, you got Martin, Marlin, Wallace, Elliott, and Rudd competing against new guys like Johnson, Stewart, Newman, and Kenseth. That's crazy. Oh wow, I had no idea it was this poetic.
Stewart had endured a difficult season.
Hi,
from
Stewart.
the DNF
Hey, I
to
have
the
that
Daytona
car right
500,
next to me.
Getting injured in the spring Darlington race, getting into altercations with media members during the season, which left Home Depot searching for reasons to keep sponsoring him. But a win at the Glen and more consistent finishes kept him at arm's length for most of the season. He wasn't dominant, but he was there when he needed to be. Race 28 at Dover was another key stepping stone in determining
Yep,
the
fucking
champion.
Jimmie Johnson.
Johnson won for the season Dover sweep and closed on Martin for the points.
It felt like Jimmie
Mark
Johnson
finished
won
second,
every
and Stewart
fucking
fifth.
Dover race I
So
watched.
Johnson's big day wasn't as impactful. However, Sterling posted another sub-20th place finish, and Gordon fared even worse, getting involved in someone else's mess. Jeff left Dover 190 points back of the lead over a full race, and it looked like all
Look
was
at
lost.
Stewart jumping up
Just
to
as the
third.
24 team had turned the corner
Went
and
from
locked
6th to
in,
3rd in like
bad
one
luck ended
race.
their challenge. Or did it? Race 29, the second ever race at Kansas. was
Kansas.
a turning point not only for the season, but for a driver's career. Midway through the race, Sterling Marlin got loose in the pack. corrected
Oh,
into
that's
the
a
turn two
hard
wall.
hit, and there's no safer
It would be
barriers
another
there.
Devastating blow to their title hopes, but a midweek visit to the doctors was much worse. Marlin was diagnosed with a broken vertebrae and was done for the rest of the season. His title hopes were gone, and when he returned in 2003, he was never the same. While the 40 team pondered what came next, the results from Kansas threw another wrench into the title chase.
Wait. Fucking by 2003, they did, or 2002, they still didn't have safer barriers at all these tracks. I mean, I guess not. I don't know when they finally got those barriers in, but damn, that sucks that they could have had them, but they still had those concrete
Gordon
walls.
and the 24 team resurrected their glimmer of hope with a win, although with Stewart finishing 8th and Johnson 10th, Jeff's win didn't make as much of a dent as they'd hoped. However, Mark lost his engine in the late going, finishing 25th and handing the title lead to Jimmie Johnson, who became the first rookie to lead the point standings. And with only a handful of races to go, he had a real shot at the championship. It looked like it would shape up to be a three-way title battle between Johnson, Martin, and Stewart. I will be sounding like an incredibly broken record by now, but race 30 at Talladega is where the entire
It's
season got
Dega,
flipped on its head.
baby.
You might say Yeah, that's to be expected at Talladega.
Yep.
But this was unlike any other Talladega race. There was no big one that changed the finishing order. In fact, there wasn't even a caution during the race. The most impactful moment of the entire season happened on the pace laps before the race. With qualifying rained out and the field set by points, Johnson and Martin lined up on the front row. But as they came through the tri-oval on the pace lap, Mark's steering column seized up and sent him into Johnson. The race got underway with those two having to make repairs. Mark could only fight
I
back to 30th.
forgot. Holy shit. I didn't know that happened
Johnson
this
eventually
year.
lost his engine and finished 37th anyway. In fact, every Hendrick engine in the field expired, including Jeff Gordon's, and the 2014 finished a brutal 42nd. Gordon's title hopes were beyond dead now, as he fell to 7th in points. It was an uncharacteristically unlucky stretch of races that left the 2014.
I mean, Hendrick engines failing is unheard of, basically.
Competitors allowed Tony Stewart to latch
Hey,
himself onto
Tony.
the dominant car of Dale Earnhardt Jr. during green flag pit stops, and Tony followed Jr. home for a humongous points day. Stewart had gone from 36 back after Kansas to 72 ahead after Talladega.
Woohoo!
Johnson was now 82 back, and everyone else was over 100 points behind. In a cruel twist of fate in race number 31 at Charlotte, Jamie McMurray won
Yeah, Jamie
Sterling
Mac.
Marlin's 40 car in just his second ever Cup race. This was a popular win, but also bittersweet because Sterling had won this race the year prior, and Jamie obviously proved the 40 team still had a great setup. Could Sterling have clawed
That
back
really
into
sucks.
contention had he not wrecked at Kansas? It's
Man,
possible,
that
but
sucks.
we'll never really know. Stewart extended his advantage, and it seemed like he'd eventually win it. Mark was now well over 100 points back, but Johnson still kind of hung around.
Mr. Tony
Race number
Stewart
32
climbing
at Martinsville,
ahead.
The top three more or less finished under a blanket, so not much movement was happening.
The GOAT. My
Stewart
GOAT.
posted another
He's
top
not
five
the
at
GOAT,
Atlanta,
but he's my
while
GOAT.
Johnson had a dismal day. Race number 34 at Rockingham was where Mark
3
Martin
races
struck
left.
back, however. Not too long ago, I watched this race in full while I was bored one night, and the 20 team was really struggling early on in the race. Stewart even got lapped at one point, while Mark had a top 5 car pretty much all day. While Mark finished second and narrowly missed out on the win,
This Skip
finishing
Benson?
behind Johnny Benson, who finally
Johnny
did claim his first Cup
Benson!
win. Greg Zipadelli
Hell yeah,
and the Tony
Johnny!
crew got the car working enough to where Tony finished 14th, and this result essentially won them the championship. Well, if that didn't do it, Mark Martin receiving a 25-point penalty for failing post-race inspection at Rockingham sure did. It ultimately didn't matter though, as Stewart claimed the title by 46 points at Homestead. While
Yeah,
it may have become a
Tony.
little
His
anticlimactic
first.
by the end, the 2002 points battle was one of the strangest NASCAR ever had. It was truly the championship no one seemed to want to win. While 1992 was ultimately determined by a great stretch from Alan Kulwicki, while Bill Elliott encountered bad luck, with Davey Allison in the crosshairs, 2002 saw numerous drivers fall by the wayside.
Yeah,
on
it seemed
the
like
late
anybody
races
could have
of the
won it
season.
at that point.
Sterling Marlin
And
was
Sterling
losing his grip on the
didn't
title
get
before
hurt. He
his
probably
injury.
could have won it.
Jeff Gordon backed up the 2 wins that got him into real contention by having one of the most unholy run of races ever. And Johnson got the points lead and then did nothing after the Talladega debacle.
Yeah.
Newman didn't have enough good finishes. Rusty didn't win at all but was high in points all year. And Kenseth ironically had 10 finishes lower than 30th that sunk his chances despite having the most wins. While the race for the title raged on, Kurt Busch quietly won 3 of the last 6 races and went from 11th in points to 3rd, only 159 points back by the end.
Yeah.
Kurt had
Another
started that
couple
run
of races.
earlier, he might have had a real chance.
Yeah. Could have been
That
back
left
to back.
Stewart and Martin
Nope,
as the
I
team
lied.
that avoided the
2004, that's
catastrophic blows of
21.
the others, but they were plenty quick all season. We had a full season points race, and yet numerous times in the last 10 races, the
Yeah,
presumptive favorite changed
Tony.
nearly every week.
Yay.
Back in these
That's my
days,
boy.
consistency was the name of the game. Bad finishes were backbreaking. When Kenseth won the title winning 1 race the next year, while Newman was nowhere near it while winning 8, NASCAR and its partners drew the wrong conclusions and instituted the chase for the Cup. All
Boo.
they had to do
Boo.
to fix the
Bring back
season-long
full
lap
season
system, which
points,
was in use from
baby. Come
1975 to
on.
2003, was to award more points for the winner and maybe the top 5 as a whole. That really would have incentivized teams to win races instead of points race.
Yeah.
That's a whole tangent for another day.
Yeah.
But 2002 sticks out in
Yeah,
my memory
yeah,
because of
yeah.
how bonkers those last 10 races were. It was almost like a mini chase with how everything changed after race 26. While 2001 and 2003 were title runaways,
Yeah, they were like, man,
2002 kept us enthralled
this
to the
season
end
produces a
and
lot
gave
of
us a new
crazy
champion.
racing in a full
It
points
remains my
format.
favorite NASCAR
What if we
season of
just
all
made
time.
it a 10
It had
race
the younger
format
guys like
instead.
Gordon, Stewart,
Now we have to deal with
Johnson,
that shit
Kenseth,
for the rest of the time.
Harvick, Newman, Kurt Busch, Dale Jr. It had the vets like Rusty, Ricky Rudd, Mark Martin, Bill Elliott, Dale Jarrett, and even more like Bobby
I'm surprised this
Labonte,
motherfucker
Ricky
has a
Craven,
picture of all
Burton
these
brothers,
diecasts.
Bobby Gordon, Michael Waltrip, Dave Blaney. The list keeps going on and on. It may not have had as many different winners as 2001 did, but it was super competitive, and different teams and manufacturers were stronger at certain tracks, which led to a lot of parity in who ran up front. But it wasn't forced parity through rule sets, it kind of just happened. It was the last season where the older guys still kind of put up a fight, as in 2003 the younger guys really started to take over.
Yeah.
If you're still watching at this point,
Hi.
I want to thank you, and I hope this video scratched the
no
nostalgia
problem.
itch I know a lot of you have for that era. I really
NASCAR's
do believe
big
that
cheating
2001 to
scandal you never heard
2005
of. Hold on, wait. I'm gonna put this in the watch later. 'Cause this sounds very interesting.
The term spike.
Hold
is
on.
synonymous
Shut
with
up.
2000.
Shut up. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Man, I can't believe that there were so many of those old drivers still involved that late in the season. Like half of the field were like some classic drivers like Bill Elliott and Rusty Wallace, but unfortunately for them, and I mean at this point in time especially, youth has been prevailing, because if you look at since 2020, who's it been? It's been Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Logano, Blaney. Wait, no. Hold on. 2020, Chase Elliott. 2021 was Kyle Larson. 2022 was... 2022 was Joey Logano. 2023 was Ryan Blaney. 2024 was Joey Logano. 2025 was Kyle Larson. And then now it's anybody's, because they swapped off of the playoff system. So who knows? Right now it's looking like it should be Tyler Reddick, but when the points reset, it could be just about anybody. But thank you, Jake Sim Racing. Most appreciated. All right, what do we got next? We're going bankrupt, I think, in this next one. We're going bankrupt with Pan Am. If you guys like planes, or if you hate planes, we're really about to enforce one of them right now. Hold on, you're a little too quiet.
One claims it's the company's only chance for survival.
You like planes, Texan? Well, lock in. We're about to talk about a whole airline.
TWA presents the difference between Kodak is filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection.
Oh, that says Jake Williams. I'm blocking the credits. I'm sorry. Bankrupt.
What's up, guys? My name
Hi.
is Jake, and welcome
Hi,
to
Jake.
the pilot episode of my brand new show, Bankrupt. In abandoned and sometimes canceled, I often like to break down the corporate side of topics I'm on. Honestly, that's because it's something I genuinely am passionate about. That very interest has led me to this brand
Big
new
Red
series
Boat,
where I wanted to take
Part
a deeper
2.
look into some of the most fascinating company bankruptcies in history. So in this very first episode, I wanted to take a look at one time the world's largest international
I was gonna say
airline,
Pan Am
an
is
absolute
has like a
iconic global
legendary
brand,
downfall.
and one that eventually met its demise in the early 90s. Let's take a look at Pan American World Airways. In 1927, two AirCorp majors formed a small mail carrier service called Pan American Airways. After successfully raising enough capital, obtaining landing rights, and U.S. mail contracts, their first historic flight from Key West, Florida to Havana, Cuba became America's first scheduled international flight. This instantly accelerated
Pan
Pan
Am?
American's notoriety
Really?
and put the company on a path to success as it began a new
I
era
submitted the
for
history of a
American
potato?
aviation. After some
What if I
mergers into
submitted
Pan
these
American,
hands to your
visionary
face?
Juan Trippe took the helm of the company and immediately began appointing pilots to start scouting air routes in the Caribbean. And this became the basis for all other aircraft to follow. Other key executives were hired to ensure the airline's quality and
Licks
care,
them?
with major changes like prohibiting pilot
I'm not
smoking.
gonna say it.
And since
I was
the
gonna say
majority of
something, not
Pan
gonna
Am's
say it.
fleet
Not
were
family
flying
friendly.
boats,
'Cause we all
pilots
know
were
I'm very
assigned
family
nautical
friendly.
captain uniforms, which have carried through to this day. The company continued to expand and grow with new routes and more aircraft with what they called the Clipper fleet.
Brave
a
man,
collection of larger, iconic
stop!
airplanes which now offered routes as far as South America. Their newly built airport in Miami, where these planes
Hates
were
my
based,
ass.
became the busiest marine terminal in the world. By 1935, the airline became the first to fly across the Pacific to China, a feat heavily commended. The airline's innovations continued to excite with each passing month, with brand new aircraft, routes, and major game changers like the innovation with land-to-air radio navigation. Pan Am also developed long-range aviation weather services, new
They're shooting
aircraft
down
with
that
more
plane with
efficient
that camera.
propellers, and
Look out.
enormous leaps in the industry, like being the first American airline to establish airport-to-plane air
I feel
traffic
like I
control
could fly a
systems.
plane
But
in an
perhaps
emergency
most notably,
situation.
Pan Am
I
became
feel
the
like
first
I could do
airline
that.
to fly around the world. Following World War II, competition grew much stronger with emerging airlines like TWA and United. However, this didn't slow down the airline's innovation and growth.
Did you guys
Domestic
ever
and
see
foreign
that
flights were
trend? I
added,
think it was
along-
like, it was probably like 2 years ago at this point, maybe more. There was a trend where people would go up to guys and they'd put like a microphone in their face and they'd be like, if a plane were going down, do you think you could land it safely? And they would ask them, and like 90% of the time the guys would say yes. I think I could, in an emergency situation, land a plane safely. You know how to turn? Yes. I've played Microsoft Flight Simulator, you know, a couple of times in my past. I think I can do it, you know? I think I can make it happen.
with the company continuing to
90% of that 90% don't know you need to hold the stick back slightly to turn. Who doesn't know that? Everyone's seen a cartoon before. Everyone's seen like a pilot on television. You have to fucking... Yeah. Also, if the plane is like crashing, you're gonna have some kind of assistance. You know, I didn't say that like you had no communication. I said like if you specifically had to land a plane in an emergency situation, you know, you could have a co-pilot, or maybe not a co-pilot, but you could probably have radio communication. They could probably walk you through it. I could probably figure it out. Or yeah, at least have somebody on the plane who has played Microsoft Flight Simulator. They could probably figure it out. You know, it's like, okay, I'm grabbing it, and you know, lean off to the side. Yeah, you'd be fine. Maybe not fine. Maybe not everyone would be fine because there are pilots who were not fine. But if it's like, you know, put it down in the Hudson, I was like, well, I could certainly do that.
order new planes, helping popularize Boeing's DC-4, which made flying a little more affordable with the new aircraft. Through the coming years, Pan Am continued to be competitive in the airline market, still gaining value and continuing its presence of quality and comfort. By early 1950, the company changed its name officially to Pan American World Airways. In the same
Lame.
year, they ordered
No
more
aura.
planes and developed their
It's the
first
man in the yellow
economy-only
suit.
aircraft to fly transatlantic from New York to
Pan
London.
Am from
By
the Hunger Games?
1955,
Which one's
Boeing
Pan
had
Am
been
from the Hunger
developing an all-new
Games?
type of aircraft, with Pan Am signed on to order 20. And in October of 1958, Pan Am flew the inaugural
Pan
flight
Am
of the
from
very
Cyberpunk?
first
That one I
American
know.
jet-powered passenger aircraft. This is when Pan American Airways saw an explosion of
oh,
innovation and
right.
growth.
Right.
By
Gotcha.
1960, Pan Am had signed a $115 million lease with a development company to occupy a brand new office building in Midtown Manhattan. This became Pan Am's new corporate office with their enormous logo at the top.
That
the
looks-
now iconic New York skyscraper was a symbol
Yeah,
of how
isn't that the
enormous
MetLife
Pan
building?
American was becoming. The airline
That's the
didn't stop
MetLife
with its
building.
desire for innovation, though, as Concorde was being developed in
Wait,
Europe.
wait,
Boeing
wait,
famously tried
no, no, please. Hold on, wait, what the fuck? That's the MetLife building. MetLife. I've seen this in person. Can I... No one understands how funny I am. Actually, want to chop my shit smooth off. Don't do that. That'd be cringe. If you did that, what are you gonna do? Well, like you're gonna give up on being funny just because no one gets how funny you are. Cringe, cringe. Yeah, see, that's what it is now. It's the fucking MetLife building. This very fucking. I've seen this in person. I think I have a picture of this on my phone somewhere. If not on my phone, then definitely on like one of my social medias from back in the day. Yeah. I didn't know MetLife took that over. That's funny.
their hand with their own supersonic jet, which Pan American had expressed deep interest in. However, that project
Give up
by
on being
Boeing
funny. You
was
gotta
killed
start
off
being
due to
funny
budgetary
first.
issues
Hey!
and for the development of a new
I'm kidding,
wide-body
Nubs.
carrier. This
Please
was
don't hate
actually
me.
partially born from Pan Am, and as a result, the company was already placing orders. Finally, on January 22nd, 1970, the twin-deck Boeing 747 took its commercial flight for the first
Yay.
time, once again, with Pan American World Airways. This is where Pan Am really peaked, with its new tagline, the most experienced airline in the world. And it really was. In just one single year, the airline had carried more than 6.7 million passengers and had a fleet size of over 150 aircraft.
Don't
flying
ban
to
me, it's
86
my own
countries.
stream.
This
The
was a
hell
key
you mean
point in
ban
American
me?
Aviation and Pan Am. So what was it really like to experience this firsthand? Well, I wanted to find out, so I got the very exclusive opportunity
Oh,
to talk
hold
to
up.
Steve Prisky, a former head flight attendant who had been flying with Pan Am for a decade.
Well, it was absolutely spectacular. I had actually grown up flying on Pan Am. When I was 6 weeks old, I took my first flight on Pan Am when we moved to Brazil, and then later on we moved to Australia, so I was very familiar with Pan Am.
Australia,
as a passenger.
Knives.
I'd actually logged about 500,000 miles
Here, girl.
before I got hired by Pan Am. Pan Am really was a family airline. You know, a lot of big companies, you sort of get lost in the shuffle of
He
the
said
companies where you
Australia.
are. You're just a number. Pan Am was a family airline. It was started by Juan Trippe, and he and his wife used to fly the airline all the time, and
Yeah.
they treated all of us employees like
Shut
we were family.
up.
And I think that's
Kill
one of
this
the
woman.
reasons that people loved flying with Pan Am so much. Not just the way the corporation treated us, but all of us employees treated each other as family. That's the way we felt about each other. And I think that's why people loved working for Pan Am so much.
Pan Am was the international airline. It became an iconic brand, not just in the United States, but around the world. During the company's peak, Pan American World Airways was a billion-dollar corporation, and really seemed like nothing could stop this massive airline. But then, 1973 rolled through, and with it, the United States oil crisis. I've talked about this before on how severe the
Wait a
economic
sec. When did the
impact
thing
was on the
happen?
country.
When did the big
Basically,
thing happen?
oil supply to the United States was limited, and because of the demand vastly overwhelming the supply, prices shot up dramatically. This
Never
was a
mind,
problem
I
for
have found out
consumers,
when the
as
thing
fuel was in
happened.
very
It's-
short
we're a
supply and
little bit
extremely
away.
expensive. But companies who relied on fossil fuels were severely affected by this. Jet fuel prices were estimated to multiply by 4, which meant operating costs for just one flight skyrocketed. This was obviously a problem for every airline at the time, but for Pan Am, it was a nightmare. While other airlines in the States flew domestically with smaller aircraft, because Pan Am
Yeah,
only
they went
flew
overseas.
international
Yeah.
on high-demanded routes, the company invested heavily in 747s, adding more and more to their fleet. The thing is, though, these 4-engine first-iteration aircraft were by no means efficient. This meant the already enormous amounts of fuel these jets ate up would be 4 times as expensive as it used to be. The enormous aircrafts were also barely ever full during this time, just adding to the substantial losses. This, coupled with the older, less efficient, smaller planes, raised operating costs through the roof. The slowing economy also resulted in less people traveling.
I feel like
and
I
Pan Am's
had
gigantic
a
infrastructure
model
was starting
Pan
to become
Am
a little too bloated
plane
to
when I was
financially
younger, but I
sustain.
could be
Cuts
wrong.
began to be made in the airline's
I feel like I
workforce,
had
and a
one, but I don't
company-wide
know.
turnaround effort. While the oil
I would have to
crisis
go
took
through
its
my old
financial toll on
things.
the airline, with around
Because I have a whole
$364
bin of like
million
cars
in
and shit that I have
losses
from
and
when I
over
was a
$1 billion
kid.
in
I feel like I had a
debt. By
Pan Am plane now.
1977, Pan Am regained its profitability. However, it would be permanently scarred by what happened. By the late 70s, competition was growing on the company as new airlines creeped in with market share, and Pan Am was attempting to gain it back. After a poorly handled merger in 1980, Pan American's financial situation had worsened. The company's CEO had decided it was time to sell off some of the airline's assets to stabilize their finances and get the
Right.
company back on track. Pan Am sold their lease and their Manhattan head office to Metropolitan Life for around $400 million, and the company sold off their hotel chain, the Intercontinental.
Am I wrong for thinking that 400 million for a skyscraper in Manhattan is kind of low? I don't know if that's. I'd imagine that was like 19. Hold on, wait, pull it up, Jamie. Hold on, I need to look this up. I need to look this up. How much was it? Like how much? Hold on. Pan Am sells to MetLife. Did they? Oh wait, it was 400 million in 1981. All right, let's do the math. 1981. Wait, hold on. How much was it? $400 million in 1981. What? 400 million is... Okay, that makes way more sense. In 1981, $400 million to today's money is 1 billion. I just slammed my hand on the desk. $1,465,434,534.45 if you are so inclined to collect the cents on that. That makes
While
much
their
more
core
sense.
Financial situation didn't recover as well as they hoped. The airline was making an effort to grow and stay competitive with the order of new Airbus A300s and A310s to replace their aging and costly 727s. The idea was that this investment would reap long-term improvements now that operating costs are decreasing. In 1985, Pan Am's CEO made the substantial decision to sell their entire Pacific division, which encompassed 25% of Pan Am's routes
How
to United
Pacific are we
Airlines
getting
for
here?
$750 million. This, of course, was a further
1985.
attempt to recover their increasingly dire financial situation.
They
and
didn't
to
even
pay off
mention
some of
the
their
big
debt.
thing.
However,
The
to gain
big
back some of
thing
its market
that
share,
happened with
the
Pan
airline
Am.
licensed out its name to smaller regional airlines and even acquired one to service out of their New York hub. However, the airline had been plagued by several terrorist attacks, and in the Ukraine, the Chernobyl disaster had just taken place. This, among other factors, deterred much of the public from traveling to Europe. Not great for Pan Am now that they were focusing heavily on transatlantic flights. By 1988, the company's CEO had been replaced and immediately began refurbishing older aircraft. This was until December of 1988, when another very public setback would haunt the company. Pan Am Flight 103, a Boeing 747, was flying at 31,000 feet over the town of Lockerbie, Scotland, when a bomb concealed inside a suitcase towards the front of the aircraft exploded. The blast penetrated the fuselage, causing the enormous aircraft
This
to
was
break
not
up
the thing.
mid-flight and rain
This
down
was not the
over
thing I was
Lockerbie.
thinking of.
The disaster killed all 259 people on board and 11 people on the ground.
I was dating a
Wait, whoa. Hold on. I need to rewind this. What the fuck happened? What?
1988, the company's CEO had been replaced and immediately began refurbishing older aircraft. This was until December of 1988, when another very public setback would haunt the company. Pan Am Flight 103, a Boeing 747, was flying at
I didn't hear
31,000
this one.
feet
I heard of
over
this
the town of
1977
Lockerbie,
flight.
Scotland, when a bomb concealed inside a suitcase towards the front of the aircraft exploded. The blast penetrated the fuselage, causing the enormous aircraft to break up mid-flight and rain down over Lockerbie. The disaster killed all 259 people on board and 11 people on the ground.
I was dating a new hire stewardess named Jocelyn Reyna that was based out of London. And on December the 21st, I was laying over in San Diego. I was doing West Coast shuttles. And when we went out to the airplane the next morning, we're sitting in the terminal waiting for our plane to board, and a gate agent comes over to us with this long list. And he says one of our planes just went down. And so, of course, we're all crazily perusing the list, looking for names of people that we might know. And, of course, it was Pan Am 103 that had just gone down. There's supposed to be 12 flight attendants on an airplane, on a 747, 10 stewards, stewardesses, and 2 pursers. This crew had 13 names on it. The last name was added in pencil, and it was my fiancée, Jocelyn Reyna.
This wasn't the first time
Fuck,
Pan Am had been involved
man.
in a major accident either. Back in
Oh
1977,
my
while
God,
in the Canary
holy
Islands, a
shit.
KLM 747 struck a Pan Am 747 on the runway. The disaster killed 500.
Wait. I'm sorry. I'm bewildered by this guy's story. Holy shit.
This wasn't the first time Pan Am had been involved in a major accident either. Back in 1977,
Yes,
while
this
in
is the one
Canary
I know.
Islands, a KLM 747 struck a Pan Am 747 on the runway. The disaster killed 583 people.
Yeah,
which
this is
still
the
to
one
this
I know.
day
I know the
remains
1977
deadliest
Pan Am
aviation
disaster.
accident ever.
Yeah.
However, this time with Flight 103, Pan Am would be a blame for the
How
accident.
did I upload a
The
short while
US
streaming?
government found
I
the
scheduled
airline
it.
Guilty of willful misconduct.
Oh, hi,
with lax
Poco.
security
Yeah, sorry you had to
screenings.
come in at such a
FAA charged
time.
the airline with 19 accounts of security failures, and a civil lawsuit was filed from the families of
Holy
those who
shit.
died, seeking $300 million in compensation from the company. Obviously, this very public, horrible disaster did not reflect well on Pan American, and given their already rocky financial situation, their now
What a
tarnished
fucking
safety record was a crucial
decade and a
blow.
half.
Now the company was struggling along, looking
Jesus.
for a possible merger or a buyer to bail out the company of its ever-increasing debts. In August of 1990, the final blow to the company came with the start of the Gulf War. This completely deterred Americans' desire to fly internationally, and especially now with Pan Am focusing heavily on transatlantic-only routes, this was an enormous blow to their profits. Pan Am was losing money drastically. The airline immediately cut back on all non-essential costs to outweigh the enormous losses, and the company's long battle with debt reached a long-feared point. Pan American World Airways was no longer able to
Is
sustain
Pan Am
itself,
counting back?
and
I'm gonna look at that
finally, on
after
January
this video. I'm gonna look into it.
1991, the company
Or he might
filed
mention
for
it.
bankruptcy.
Maybe not. This
With
is
all of
this
these
video's
major
a
hits
years
to the
old.
corporation, Pan Am just couldn't recover. It's estimated that the airline's financial situation had been so awful that they had been losing up to $3 million a day. So, as Pan
A
Am attempted to
day?
reorganize, Delta Airlines
If
stepped
I
in
ever
and
see
purchased
$3
a
million in
huge
my
chunk of the
life.
remaining profitable assets,
That'd be
totaling
insane.
around
What? You're
$416
losing $3 million a
They
day?
also took 45% control of the company, as the restructuring plan was going to allow Pan American to operate out of Miami at a much smaller capacity with a fleet of only 60 aircraft. However, by the end of the year, Pan Am was still sustaining heavy losses, and Delta, as the majority shareholder, had decided to pull the plug. On December 4th, 1991, Pan American World Airways ended all operations.
Well, when I started
Ow.
flying in
Hit my hand on my
1979, there
desk.
was a rumor that you heard all the time, we're going broke, we're going broke. I heard that from day one when I was hired in 79. You know, the company had
I can't believe the dude he's interviewing lost somebody on that bombing flight. That's insane. Oh my god. When did this come out? 8 years
had
ago?
been struggling, as you mentioned,
Almost 9 years ago, I'd
financially
imagine.
for a couple, 3 years before the very end. And so what they were trying to do is entice a bunch of us A-scalers to quit. And they were hiring B-scale flight attendants, people for less than half what they were paying us, to replace us. So a whole bunch of us took advantage of the early out, as they call it. And so many of us retired in 1989, 1990. Of course, we were all counting on getting flight benefits, medical benefits, and our retirement pay.
Right.
So one morning, everybody wakes up in 1991, and nothing. Everything came to a grinding halt. Our retirement pay gone.
Really?
All of,
Fuck.
all of our flight benefits, medical benefits, all gone.
Fuck.
Just instantly.
Oh
So it
my
was a pretty
fuck,
devastating
dude.
event.
What?
Not only for the people still flying, but for many of us that went already retired, expecting that the company was probably going to continue in business even though it was struggling. It was quite a shock to everybody.
The 64-year-old company, the icon of international aviation and the world's most experienced airline, was finished. By
Oh
the mid
my-
to late 90s, all of Pan Am's assets had been sold off, including, perhaps most iconic and valuable, their name. The brand since has been brought back a few times as airlines, none of which still exist today. The name does, however, live on as Pan Am Railways, which still does operate today. Pan American World Airways really was just caught in the wrong time. While negligence and mismanagement did contribute, I think a former vice president of Pan Am says it best. What could go wrong did. No one who followed one trip had the foresight to do something strongly positive. It was the most astonishing example of Murphy's Law in extremis. The airline was just plagued by one disaster after another. Every financial hit it took brought it further and further into debt, while still continuing to provide the service and quality Pan Am was known for. Though, the airline is certainly not forgotten. We did get ABC's Pan Am, which in itself didn't really work out either.
I was gonna say, I was like,
while
wait,
was
that
doing
that
research
didn't
on this
work out.
company, I discovered
That I remember hearing about it, but no one talks about it anymore, so I'd imagine it's not doing too well.
Who build communities and events to meet and reminisce. You don't really ever see that kind of passion towards a corporation anymore. And I think that stands today as a true element of how powerful and iconic Pan Am was to the world. Pan American was the golden age of aviation. The company arguably did more for the industry than any other airline, and it was the first to bring forward new and exciting forms of travel that are commonplace today. While obviously I never flew on Pan Am, well, honestly, I've only started flying last year, I think it's absolutely incredible that such a well-respected,
You know what's fun? I only
enormous
started
company
flying
could see a fate like it did.
about 3 years
It was
ago.
truly the final flight
For
the
all
most
the 80 years that I've
experienced
lived, I've
airline in the
only been flying for about
if you
3
want
of
to help
them.
support and fund this show and my other projects, please consider donating to us on Patreon.
Please
A link will be
consider
in the description
donating on the
below.
Patreon.
Anyway, guys, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat.
Thank you, Bright Sun
and
Films.
Thank you very much for watching.
Yes, thank you. What are they up to nowadays? Oh, the McBarge update. They're the ones? Okay. Okay, I didn't know that was the same person. Wow, look at that. All right, I'm going to run to the bathroom real quick, then I'll be back, and then we'll hit our third video today, okay? Okay. the fuck up, Kasane Tato. Ah, shut up, Defunctland. All right, hello, we're back. Hello. Hi. Back, don't worry. Don't worry, in case you were worried about me. I'm back. This is something I wanted to watch this earlier today, and it's an older video. It's a very much an older video. How long? About 6 years ago? Yeah, 5 or 6 years ago. I really wanted to watch this, but I wanted to watch it with you guys. So, this is Walt Disney's City of the Future, Epcot, by Defunctland. What is this? He's breaking it down. I had no idea anything ever happened to Epcot. I've only ever heard. I've never been to Disney World or anything. Yeah. So I don't know anything about Epcot. I thought it was just something that was always there. He's making it spooky. Oh. No longer spooky. Hold on. Hold on.
Are you aware? Are you aware that Drippy Brothers Studios is making the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy movie?
They can't be making a movie about us.
But they are, and they're using actors.
What did I say? Hold on, I'll restart it. Alright, let me hold on. Hold on. I'll get this ready. Right, alright. Shut up. Alright, this is what I was referencing, okay? This is the video. This is the Defunctland video. All right, he did that, right? And that's clearly a reference to Citizen Kane. However,
Are you aware that Drippy Brothers Studios is making the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy movie?
They can't be making a movie about us.
But they are, and they're using actors.
okay, that was it. Okay. I can't remember. What was Epcot something
Once-in-a-lifetime
that failed?
opportunity for everyone who participates. Speaking for myself and the entire Disney organization.
Hi, Walter.
we're ready to
Walter.
go right now.
Yay.
Doesn't that stagger you? Our corporation is dedicated to making Walt Disney's dream a reality, but it cannot be done without the help of you people here in Florida.
Oh, the help of me.
This is Roy Disney. On February 2nd, 1967, he is speaking to
67.
an audience of over 900 people in Winter Park, Florida. This group of business leaders, politicians, and members of the press had just sat through the first public screening of what would become known as the Epcot film. This 25-minute film was the final notable on-screen appearance of Walter Elias Disney. Walt had passed less than 2 months before the first screening of the film, on December 15th, 1966, at the age of 65. The project that he was proposing in the Epcot film was his most ambitious dream. It was the
Walt
culmination
only
of
lived
his
to
life's work.
66?
65 years of a
I
man's
mean, I'm
life.
assuming
That's
before
a
they
lot
put
to
his
try
head
to
in
get
a
into
jar
a
and froze it.
presentation.
But, like,
it's not
really?
enough to
He only
listen
lived
to
to
what Walt Disney
66?
said.
That's
It is
interesting.
important to understand who he was. What was the last thing that he planned? Maybe Epcot, his last project, would reveal something about him. The world was still mourning the loss of the storyteller, the loss of the character, the death of Uncle Walt. All they saw was a big American, one of the biggest. But how was he any
Walter
different than Ford,
Hartwell
or
Disney.
Hearst, or John
I
Doe?
live at
He was as loved
308
and as hated and as talked about as any
Happily
person in
Ever
his time.
After
But when he
Lane.
came to die, he had something on his mind.
Orlando,
called
New
Epcot.
Mexico.
What does it mean? It deserves
This
investigation.
is my confession.
Epcot, its origins and its fate. Certainly, it must turn out to be a very simple thing. For most of its development, Walt's Epcot project was top secret, with only a select few people within Walt Disney Productions aware of its existence. One of these
Those
people
are some
was Harrison Buzz
crooked
Price.
ass
Price
ties.
first met
Straighten
Walt
that
Disney
shit
in
out.
1953.
1,
When
2,
Price was
3,
employed at the
Happily Ever
Stanford
After
Research
Lane.
Institute,
Mickey
an
Mouse
economic
Clubhouse.
development research
This
firm.
is my
Price
confession.
conducted the initial feasibility study
If
for
you're
Walt's
watching
amusement
this,
park concept,
I'm probably
Disneyland,
dead.
and Walt and Price
Murdered
maintained a
by
great
time.
working relationship throughout the
65
process.
years after my
This was
birth.
largely due to the way in which Price communicated with Walt about his ideas. Price quickly learned that Walt hated to be told no. Many of Walt's ideas were risky, and some saw them as ridiculous and impossible. His older brother Roy, who was in charge of the company's finances, was often put in the position of pushing back on Walt's ambition, which put a constant strain on their relationship. Price knew to always say yes to Walt's ideas first before diving into the project's constraints. This simple yet ingenious strategy led to a partnership between the two that would last over a decade, and any time Walt was considering a new construction project, he would call upon Price to do a feasibility study. In 1957, 2 years after Disneyland opened, Walt hired Price to do a study for a new project that he was calling the City of the Arts, or 7 Art City. The City of the Arts would be a combination of a shopping district, an art school, and most interestingly, a planned community. The City of the Arts would be a functioning city of artists and art students, living, working, and showcasing their creations to visitors. It would feature restaurants, shops, and
Fuck,
model homes.
right.
Price was tasked
Maybe
once
he
again
should've.
with determining a location.
Maybe it would've saved
Walt
it.
began planning his community of artists. Walt believed that one of his best abilities was to bring people, especially creative people, together. He often thought that he knew what was best for the people that worked for him, and that he had the answers to their problems. For instance, when Walt built his new animation studio in Burbank in 1939, he designed every aspect of the space to create a perfect creative environment. Walt even considered placing apartments at his Burbank studio for his animators to live in, because he believed that they would enjoy the convenience and that it would result in better work. This was an objectively terrible idea. Even without living on the lot, many of Walt's animators grew frustrated with Walt's philosophy and business practices, and his resistance to this criticism led to the infamous studio strike in 1941. This did not dissuade Walt from his City of the Arts project and the idea of building a community of artists, something Walt felt that he was already good at, minus that one time that it went horribly wrong. Despite Walt's
Wait,
confidence
what
in
do you mean
himself,
the one
over
time it went horribly
the City
wrong?
of the Arts concept was reduced
What do you
to
mean?
an innovative
What do you
art
mean by
school,
that?
dropping the planned community
What do you-
aspect. The City of the Arts would eventually evolve into the California Institute
Rewind,
of the Arts.
rewind. What
or
do you
as it is
mean? I
popularly
don't know the
known,
context.
CalArts.
What does that
Walt
mean?
shepherded the project both financially and creatively, with Price at his side. Price watched Walt design his university with a level of vigor that matched and at times surpassed his effort to build Disneyland. At one point, Walt explained to Price, quote, "This is the thing that I'm going to be remembered for." It was clear to Price that even in 1958, at the age of 57, Walt had legacy on his mind. Death, however, was not. On one occasion, Price presented some statistics that Walt had not requested, related to mortality rates. Walt
Not
exploded
requested.
on Price for bringing up the subject of death. Afterward, Imagineer Herb Ryman explained to Price, quote, "Death is not an acceptable topic."
What?
If Walt was ever satisfied with staking his legacy in cow arts, the feeling was fleeting. As the 1950s came to a close, Walt was conflicted with the public image that he had created. He was the great storyteller, the great distractor, but Walt was not content with this. His personal heroes were titans of industry, such as Henry Ford. He wanted to be remembered in a similar vein, as a contributor to the great American society. He wanted to do something that would change people's everyday lives, more than a cartoon, more than an amusement park, and even more than a university. Walt wanted to do something incredible, and as always, he had just the idea. He wanted to build a city, a planned community to be located in Florida. Palm Beach, Florida.
What a terrifying revelation you could have,
Walt was pursuing
wanting to
NBC
be
take
located
over
in
the
Florida,
distribution
of
his
all
television
places.
show. NBC was eager to distribute Walt's hit show, but they were interested in even more. NBC and their parent company, RCA, wanted an agreement closer to Walt's original deal with ABC, in which
just
Walt
spilled my
created a show for the
Gatorade on
network
my
in
chest, that's
exchange
okay.
for financing for the construction of Disneyland. NBC and RCA wanted to build a second Disneyland on the East Coast, near New York City. Walt was interested, and he hired Price to do a study on the area. Price's report was not stellar. The weather in New York would force the park to operate seasonally rather than year-round. There were few plots with enough space and suitable land to build the park, and most of New York's tourists were on business-related trips as opposed to visiting for leisure. For all of these reasons, Walt turned down the New York proposal. But this would not be the end of the talks with RCA and NBC. Shortly after New York was rejected, a man named John D. MacArthur entered the conversation. MacArthur was a billionaire businessman and real estate investor who owned around 6,000 acres of land.
He's
in
got
Palm Beach,
some
Florida.
drip on him,
He
I'm
was
not
looking
gonna
for
lie.
developers, and there was none more lucrative than Walt Disney.
Oh, your
Walt was
tie's
thrilled by
hanging
the
out of your
amount land
jacket,
MacArthur was
dude.
offering.
Come on, clean it
Disneyland
up.
consisted
What
of
the hell?
160 acres total, which included the park, parking lot, and other facilities. There was little room for Disneyland to grow inside the land that Disney owned. And after the park opened, Anaheim saw a development boom. It was especially noticeable directly outside the park, where cheap motels and tourist traps boxed Disneyland in on all sides. This outraged Walt, and it made MacArthur's 6,000 acres, over 30 times the amount used for Disneyland, all the more attractive. Of course, 6,000 acres was far too much for just a theme park, which allowed Walt to dream bigger than he ever had before. Walt began to outline his plans. He would use 400 acres of the land for a new theme park and resort space, and the rest would be used for a new planned community, or as Walt called it, a city of tomorrow. This would solve the Anaheim problem by surrounding the new theme park and resort with a development of his own design. It would also address another, more broad frustration of Walt's. Walt Disney, like many people in the late 1950s, was worried about the state of many major American cities. He was concerned about crime, poverty, education, and other issues. But more than anything, Walt
Tomorrowland,
Disney was obsessed
maybe?
with
Question
traffic.
mark?
Throughout his life,
I don't know.
Walt had seen the automobile go from a futuristic
Seemed
technology
like it.
to a constant nuisance. Cars had flooded American cities, and the pedestrian had become secondary to the automobile. Attempts to mitigate traffic within major cities had not worked, and Walt wondered how the problem might be eliminated should a city be built from scratch with the automobile in mind. Another consideration was the effects of white flight on cities, in which
What?
middle and upper class white populations moved en masse out of the city and into suburbs, often to escape integration and the civil rights movements of the era. This diverted vital resources out of inner city
dear.
communities, leaving them in a state of disarray. The problems that cities faced were in the forefront of many Americans' minds, and it would soon consume the mind of Walt, who took to the idea of developing his own community. Despite having no urban planning experience, he once again believed
the
that
fuck
he
is
was
this
the best
car?
person for the
What
job.
the
But
hell?
he was not alone in this belief. Many prominent urban designers had been pointing to Disneyland's radial design, with its hub-and-spoke layout, as a brilliant piece of urban planning. Walt's popularity and influence among the
Mobile,
public
yeah.
was also seen as a
He's got
major
the
advantage,
007
one that had
shit
often led
going
people
on.
to
He
encourage
barely
him
fits
to
in
run
that
for
car
some
by
sort of
himself.
office. Futurist author Ray Bradbury, a friend of Walt's.
Ray
once suggested
Bradbury,
that he
I
run
read
for
your
mayor of
book.
Los
That's a
Angeles
lie. I
because he
lied
believed that
about your
only
book
Walt
and
could
still got
solve the
100
city's
on the
traffic
exams.
issues.
Fuck
Walt
you, Ray
responded,
Bradbury.
quote, "Why would I run for mayor when I am already king?" It was a joke, but not entirely untrue. Walt was used to having control, something he would not have in the political sphere. If he wanted to solve the problems of the urban environment, it needed to be a private venture. Palm Beach presented this opportunity. Walt planned for a city that would use state-of-the-art technology and groundbreaking urban design techniques. It was at this point that he began referring to the project as Epcot. an acronym for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. Price
Hold
was
on,
once
we
again
gotta-
asked to do
we
a
gotta name
feasibility
drop.
study
We gotta
as
name
initial
drop,
plans were
fellas.
drafted. One study proposed the use of 12,000 acres to accommodate 65,000 residents. It would include 23 schools, 21 churches, 15 playgrounds, 2 parks, 2 golf courses, and 3 waterfront hotels. Price's studies were extensive, doing the lion's share of the work in determining what a city of this size would need to function properly. More importantly, through these studies, Price concluded that an East Coast entertainment complex would not compete with Disneyland. In fact, 2/3 of the US population lived east of the Mississippi, but they accounted for less than 10% of Disneyland's guests. The East Coast was an
Really?
untapped market.
At that
and Price's
point?
study showed the promise of such a venture. Despite the heavy research and positive conclusions, the Palm Beach project quickly fell apart, reportedly due to Roy Disney clashing with MacArthur. Unsurprisingly, the ambitious City of Tomorrow proposal for Palm Beach concerned Roy, and the deal fell through. But now Walt wanted to build a city, and there was nothing that could stop the idea from growing in his mind.
Uh-oh.
By 1960, with the Palm Beach plans abandoned, Walt was beginning the early stages of work on pavilions for the 1964 New York World's Fair, another major step.
I'm
toward
sorry,
Epcot.
Walsh, you're
While
not
the
going to be
East was an
around that
untapped
long,
market,
buddy.
it was
Spoiler
unclear if
alert.
the population was
Just
open to
saying.
being tapped by
You
Walt
know,
Disney.
might be a little,
Plus,
might be pushing
Disney
it
was
there.
building pavilions for major corporations like General Electric and Ford, and he believed that these type of corporate partnerships would be the only way for a project as big as Epcot to work. Walt hoped that major American companies would help construct Epcot, set up a facility within the city, and employ the city's residents. The fair also gave him the chance to work with the man that was considered the most influential city planner in the world at the time, the fair's president, Robert Moses. When Walt showed Moses his early plans for Epcot, Moses was amazed. He believed that Walt's plans would lead to the first accident-free, noise-free, and pollution-free city. This was ironic, as Moses' approach to city planning was the opposite of Walt's. Moses had focused on adding more and more expressways and highways to the densely populated New York City, creating many of the problems Walt was trying to rectify with Epcot. Walt would
It's a
not have
bold
to worry about
attempt.
Moses, though, as New York had already been crossed off of the list of potential locations. By 1963, Walt was deep in production on the World's Fair pavilions, but he was making time to search for a location for Epcot. Walt had Price study numerous potential venues: Washington, D.C., Colorado, Baltimore, and New Jersey, among others. Price
Not
was
New
also
Jersey,
busy
I'm
studying a
sending
spot for
you
a ski
to New
resort in the
Jersey.
Sequoia National Forest in California, and Walt was in talks to construct an indoor theme park in St. Louis. Walt was
The
adding
Shadow
projects
Realm?
at a rate
No.
faster than ever before.
I'm sending
He
you
mentioned to Price that all of their
to
projects would, quote, keep
Baltimore.
the organization busy for 40 years. Longevity bred legacy, and legacy was on his mind.
With 2 years left in his life, he's worried about legacy. That's kind of crazy.
In November of 1963, Walt and other executives hopped from location to location before traveling to the prime candidate for Epcot, Florida. However, Walt was no longer
The
on
prime
Palm
candidate,
Beach. He wasn't
Florida.
even considering
Send
the
him to
state's south.
Detroit.
Early feasibility studies had revealed that Central Florida would be the prime location for a development in the state based on tourism trends. On November 22nd, 1963, Walt and his
Send
team
him.
flew low above the city of Orlando and the outlying areas. Walt noticed a large undeveloped swamp area near the intersection of Florida's Turnpike and I-4, which at the time was
That's
under
called the
construction
Everglades,
and
buddy.
still is today. He
Oh.
pointed to the swamp and decided that this would be the location for his project. Walt could
He
be
saw all the
convinced by his
gators and
instinct.
decided
Roy
this is
needed to
where
see the
Mickey Mouse
numbers.
shall
Once
reside.
again, this is where Price came in. 5 days after Walt's flight,
Where Price
gave a
came in,
presentation
yeah,
to Walt,
he had to pay
Roy,
for it
and a
somehow.
select few others, including Vice Presidents Don Tatum and Card Walker, on what was being referred to as Project X, or Project Winter. Price's presentation was convincing. The location was set. Disney then embarked on the complicated process of acquiring the thousands of acres of land. This was done in complete secrecy to ensure that the landowners would not inflate their prices. Locals soon noticed that a large amount of land was being bought, leading to wild speculation on who the buyer might be. In June of
Me.
1965, the Orlando Sentinel concluded
At the
that it was
ripe
Disney
young
that was
age of
purchasing the
20
land.
back
Walt's
then,
plan had been
I was
exposed,
ready to
so
purchase
he
this
decided to
land.
officially announce his Florida project. On November 15th, 1965, he held a press conference alongside Florida Governor Hayden Burns. The press conference was rushed, and Walt was clearly in the early stages of development
What
on the project.
is that
He announced very
hairline?
little.
Holy shit! Hold on, I gotta rewind this. Whenever a project starts with project and ends with a letter, it involves the U.S. government. What do you mean? You meaning Project X is not good? Look at this fucking hairline. Look at this. He could be surviving just fine, right? If it's like, Right there. Look at that. That screams I'm starting a monopoly. Jeez, dude.
He announced very little, but he did note that he intended to build a new theme park and a city of tomorrow.
I'd love to be a part of building the model community.
Based on roller coaster on his airline, truly. A little dedication is in order, is it not?
Move into communities too much, and I feel that you can design so that the automobile is there, but still put people back as pedestrians again, you see.
Walt mentioned he was considering two communities, one to be named Yesterday, a nostalgic town, and another to be named Tomorrow, which would be his city of the
Wow,
future.
you're so
This
clever,
concept
Disney.
was rarely mentioned again, and Walt explained it almost as if it were a joke.
You might come one time and they stay in tomorrow, and their friends will say, but have you stayed in yesterday? Then they'll have to come back.
Shut up.
With the land
Shut
acquired
up, you
and the
think you're
project
so
announced, it was
cheeky,
finally
don't you?
time for Walt to outline his city street by street. Another key figure in the Florida project, and arguably the one man besides Walt that was closest to
Buzz
Epcot, was
Price.
Marvin Davis. Davis
Oh.
had worked at 20th Century Fox for over a decade before being recruited to Walt's amusement design firm, WED Enterprises, in 1953. Davis was given the immense task of master planning Disneyland alongside Walt.
This looks like
Together,
a
the two
Rainbow Six
pioneered the
map
single gate
layout.
concept, as well as the hub and spoke layout of the park. Over a decade later, Walt was calling on Davis once again, this time to help him with his master plan for his Florida project. Similar to Price, Davis learned how to work with Walt. Walt more or less knew what he wanted, but he did not have the artistic or architectural experience necessary to illustrate it. Davis had this expertise, so his role was to take the ideas that were in Walt's head and put them on paper. The first master plan for the Florida project was drawn in 1965, crudely by Walt himself on a piece of tissue paper. The plan had
Apologies,
dropped
I
the
put my
tomorrow
glass
Yesterday
down and
concept,
apparently I just hit a
instead only
fucking plate.
showcasing one large planned community
fuck?
in the center of the development, with a theme park resort area to the north and an airport and entrance center to the south. A monorail line ran through the entire complex, and it was to be similar to the one that had been entertaining guests at Disneyland since 1959.
I built this shit on
The project
Rainbow
as a whole
Six.
was now being
Nope,
referred
not
to
Rainbow
as
Six.
Disneyland.
Roller Coaster Tycoon. That's what it is. Put your dishes away. I ate dinner before this fucking stream.
Sometimes
Fuck
handing
you.
them to Davis when he was done, other times throwing them into the trash, forcing Davis to rush to the bin to view Walt's progress. Walt took in many inspirations for his designs. He was fascinated by Stockholm, Sweden's satellite towns, which were planned developments with a high-density center surrounded by a low-density belt, with a central rail line running through it. Walt also read books from prominent city planners, such as Victor Gruen's The Heart of Our Cities and Ada Louise Huxtable's
Should I
article,
put some
Town
of these
the
on
Fair,
Throne? Should
the
I put these
latter of
books
which
on
studied the
Throne?
proposed plan for a World's
I
Fair
feel like
in
that'd be
Washington
fun as
with a
hell.
unique design. Walt read Garden Cities of Tomorrow by Evan
Read a
Newsom
bunch of
Howard,
bullshit
and was
and
believed
be
that
like,
Walt was
yes,
influenced
I
by the
now know
Chicago
how to
architect Daniel Burnham, who
design a
famously
city.
designed the 1893 Columbian Exposition in Chicago and sparked the City Beautiful movement, which emphasized the importance of the visual nature of a city along with its practical functions. Walt was also heavily influenced by the World's Fairs that he had visited and contributed to, taking notes not only from their architecture and layout, but their attractions and accommodations as well. Throughout 1965 and early 1966, Walt, Davis, and a few other Imagineers worked to create the preliminary plans for Walt's experimental city. A special room was set aside at WED Enterprises in Glendale, with a 16-foot ceiling. Davis plastered his massive
They're in
renderings like
Arizona.
wallpaper throughout the
Help
room.
them, please.
The plans that the small team drafted for Epcot throughout 1966 were not concrete, and Walt expected many aspects of the designs to change. But what was planned, drafted, and mocked up were certainly the most bold, stunning, and unbelievable ideas that Walt had ever
Brave
dreamed.
Head starting. Ignore the yawn that just happened.
According to Walt's plans, visitors would enter Disney World through the Grand Entrance Complex. This complex had short-term parking for 11,000 cars and was connected to an airport of the future via
11,000
monorail.
cars is
The airport would have been the
insane
world's
to
first operational jetport with a
conceptualize.
radial design. The airport of the future would have also used an experimental baggage handling system and other state-of-the-art technologies.
Like, you
The
go to a
Coastal
local
Communications
place
Network,
that
later
usually
named
has
WEDCOM
probably around
and to
like
be built and
5,000
sponsored by
people or
RCA,
something
would keep track of
every
everything
so
on property,
often.
from utility
And I
management
can't
to pollution
imagine like
control.
twice
In the
that,
entrance
and then
complex,
everyone
it would
there
allow
has
receptionists
their
to
own
pull up
car.
guest resort reservations and billing information, which would have been groundbreaking in
11,000
1966. Outside of
cars.
the entrance complex would be motels, trailer parks, and campsites, one of which would be located in the property's west swamp and was referred to as wilderness camping. After checking in, guests would board a monorail and head north to start their vacation. The first stop would be the Disney World Industrial Complex. Also radially designed, this 1,000-acre complex would provide employment for many of Epcot's residents. In the renderings done by Davis and his team, one complex with 6 branches was featured. Guests or residents would leave the monorail station and board a People Mover car. The People Mover was a transportation system developed by WED Enterprises, inspired by the unique system that was used to move Ford cars at the Ford Pavilion that Disney designed for the 1964 New York World's
Disney
Fair.
Military Industrial Complex. I'm pretty sure that's existed
but it was
for a long
eventually
time,
decided
right?
to have trains
It's
consisting
just on
of
like
4
conveyor
cars
belt by
each,
now.
with each car carrying 4 people. WED Enterprises planned to test the technology at Disneyland, and a 5/8 scale People Mover system would be installed during the 1967 Tomorrowland renovation as one of the area's new signature
I want to watch it today.
In Disney World's Industrial Park, there will be a different People Mover track for each branch, taking residents from the monorail line to their place of work or taking guests on a tour of the facilities. Each branch would feature multiple buildings surrounding the People Mover station, with parking behind each for commuters. The facilities would be run by major American corporations, with
This is only
GE,
back in the
Westinghouse,
60s.
Monsanto, and RCA approached to use the
Epcot
space.
existed recently. I know it has. I'm not being gaslit, right? Like Epcot has still existed.
We'll look behind the scenes at experimental prototype plants, research and development laboratories, and computer centers for major corporations.
Visitors would be able to view the inner workings of these companies, seeing them developing new technology that would be installed in Epcot. After the Disney World Industrial Park, the monorail line would approach the main attraction of Disney World, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. This impressive 5,000-acre city would, unsurprisingly,
What about today,
be
baby
radially
girl?
designed. The city would have been 3 miles in diameter and divided into 4 sections. The center of Epcot would be the city's Business and Commerce Center.
Epcot's dynamic urban center will offer the excitement and variety of activities found only in metropolitan cities. Cultural, social, business, and
Does it look like this? Listen, they could show me a clip from fucking Blade Runner, and I would not be able to tell the
600-room
difference.
Hotel that would have been the highest point in the city. The Hotel and Convention Center would rest on top of Epcot's 50-acre Business and Commerce Center, an entirely enclosed, climate-controlled shopping district and commercial space, which would have included offices, banks, service shops, warehouses, retail space, hospitality services,
Was that a
and television
Panopticon?
studio. The shopping district would prominently feature an international showcase, in which Disney World guests and Epcot residents could shop, dine, and watch shows in various country
Shop,
pavilions depicted with
wine,
themed facades,
and dine.
such as a British Square, an Asian marketplace, and a South American plaza. This was inspired by similar areas found at numerous World's Fairs, as well as a canceled concept for Disneyland named International Street. Epcot's international pavilions would feature roaming entertainers from each of the countries, teaching guests about their customs. Walt hoped that the commercial center and international pavilions would ensure that vacationers would visit the city, rather than just passing it by on their way to the theme park. Going even further, Walt floated the idea of placing an indoor theme park in Epcot's center. Skylights would be placed on the roof of the enclosed district to allow for natural light. On top of the structure, a 7-acre recreation deck would feature outdoor activities, primarily for hotel guests. There would also be additional towers for commercial use, mainly for corporate sponsors to use as offices. At the center of the structure, immediately below the hotel, would have been Epcot's transportation lobby. Not only was Epcot to be separated into 4 sections, but its transportation would be split between multiple layers.
What the
Let's
fuck?
look at another view of
They had an
Epcot's
underground
transportation
railroad running or some
and
shit?
see how traffic flows
What?
through the heart of the city on 3 separate levels.
The fucking Fallout-esque
The truck route.
display videos are not helping their cause
Middle level
much.
is the automobile throughway, exclusively for cars. Adjacent to the roadway are parking areas for the convenience of hotel guests.
A key feature of Epcot would be its lack of stoplights, which Walt believed were a major cause of traffic. The parking below the city was reserved for hotel guests and apartment residents, but it would have been made prohibitively expensive to encourage residents not to own cars.
That
One
looks
idea was to have an
suggestive. I don't know how else to
extensive
word
electric
it.
car
It
rental
looks very
service for
suggestive.
residents wanting to leave on the weekends. Pedestrians would roam above the automobile layer. Above pedestrians, people movers and monorails would zip by. The transportation lobby was the central hub
What?
for
Don't
all of
worry
these
about
modes
it.
of transportation. Immediately outside of the central shopping district
the
were high-density
cycle.
apartments, as well
The
as other
parking
non-retail
cycle looked
buildings such as
suggestive.
administration, fire stations, post offices, sports stadiums, libraries, and hospitals. The hospitals would have tapped into WEDCOM, which would have easily stored and quickly distributed medical research and patient data. There was also to be a center of the arts, borrowing concept from Walt's City of the Arts. After high-density housing was Epcot's Greenbelt, which would have featured parks and playgrounds, as well as the city's churches and schools. Walt had ambitious plans for Epcot's education. He wanted to reimagine the school curriculum, replacing lectures and tests with a game-like learning environment.
Game-like. Building up a school of tomorrow with the teaching aids, with what I feel we could contribute, which we have been doing in a way, but this might become a pilot operation for teaching aids that would go out across the country and across the world.
Children would take courses on a computer, which would tap into WEDCOM's network, allowing them to take classes from nearby colleges remotely. There would have also been a closed-circuit television that would have allowed corporations to teach classes from the industrial park. The Greenbelt would also feature 2 large auto dealerships and service areas. Finally, the Greenbelt would boast a teen center, a feature that Walt was personally
It feels like
passionate
there's
about.
so
Teenage
much
crime
going
was a
on in
major
this
problem in
city.
cities, and Walt
And
felt
they're not
the
even
best
at the
way to
modern
control the
aspect
wayward,
of it yet.
rebellious youth was to give them their own dedicated, supervised space. Davis recalled that, quote, Walt had great hopes of using this community as a model form of treating the teenage problem, and his idea was to devise a system by which youths would judge their peers, monitoring their behavior, because the teens of the 60s loved nothing more than hanging out with a bunch of narcs in a building designed by a 60-year-old man. It is worth
Amen.
noting that the unruly generation Walt was attempting to corral was in fact the baby boomers. Finally, after the Greenbelt would be Epcot's low-density housing neighborhoods, where the majority of citizens would live. Like the industrial park, People Mover tracks would take Epcot's residents from the city center to their homes. Each of these tracks would have 4 or 5 stations along them, one in the center of each cul-de-sac. The People Mover would only stop at a station if signaled by someone in the train or someone at the station, and the maximum amount of time before a train would arrive was said to be 3 minutes. Unlike most cul-de-sacs, Epcot's neighborhoods were free of streets in order for children to play and walk safely. The space in the middle of the cul-de-sac would have been used for leisure
there's
space,
something in my
with the
eye.
road
Fuck.
system instead wrapping around the back of the homes. The homes of Epcot would have little to no private lawn space.
There's
with
so
most of the
much
greenery
green.
surrounding the home reserved for the public. The house itself would be, quote,
I want to look
completely
at more
self-sufficient,
Zillow. All this
according
is
to
making me
Admiral
do,
Joe Fowler,
or
a
making me
longtime
want to do, is look
collaborator
at
of
more
Walt's.
Zillow postings.
Every house in Epcot would have been self-powered, possibly by some form of renewable energy. Much of the house would have been automated, similar to the Monsanto House of the Future that was constructed for Disneyland's Tomorrowland. Also, throughout Epcot, a series of underground tubes would carry trash from each home and building and transport it directly to Waste Management Services, a technology called Automated Vacuum Collection, or AVAC. This was inspired by Walt growing annoyed with the garbage trucks outside of his own home waking him up at night. Closed-circuit television would also be wired into the homes, allowing residents to watch sports, entertainment, and school activities taking place on the Greenbelt. The key component of Epcot was Walt's requirement that every resident have a job.
Walter's
Walt said,
requirement.
quote, there will be no retirees, because everyone must be employed according to
What?
their ability. One of our requirements is that people who live in Epcot must keep it alive. Everyone who lives here
Wait,
will have
what?
a responsibility to keep this community an exciting.
I thought
living
Epcot was
blueprint
part
for
of the
future.
park.
Sometimes
It's a
second
part of the
satellite
community?
of Epcot was depicted in the background of concept
Did I
art
miss
or to
that?
the east on master plans. At one point,
Did I
Walt was
miss at
considering
some
the second
point that
community to be a place for
Epcot was
Epcot's
the
residents to
community
live
and not
once
just
they
a
retire?
part of the Disney
The final
World
section of
shit?
Disney World was, of course, the theme parks and resorts. On most master plans, the new park was represented by a map that looked
I
nearly
did?
identical to
What?
that of Disneyland.
I
Bay
thought
Lake, a
Epcot
natural
was
lake
a
near the
part of
theme
Disney
park, would
World.
have been extended with a man-made portion that would have surrounded the city. Other features of the theme park resort were an ice rink and a roller rink, and multiple golf courses. Walt viewed the theme park as a necessity to get funding for the project and to get vacationers into the complex. But his passion for the
Stupid,
second
what?
theme park only went
Wait,
as far
what?
as it could help the development of Epcot. When pressed about making plans for the new theme park,
Disney
Walt
World
reportedly
is
said,
the
quote,
city. Well, yeah, I
want
know
to do
Disney
Epcot.
World is the
plans for Disney
city,
World and Epcot
but
were
I
staggering.
thought
As the team
Epcot
came up
was
with
like
more
a
and more
portion
ideas,
of
the
it.
budget was
Like
significantly
how if there's a
increased. It was
park
estimated that the
and then
theme
you
park
have a
resorts in
water
Europe would
park
cost $100
section,
million,
I thought
and the rest of
Epcot
Disney
was like a
World would cost
portion of
$520
Disney.
million, with just the city of Epcot costing around $75 million. Walt planned for Epcot to have 20,000 residents, but he eventually wanted to grow the city to as many as 100,000 residents. It was also projected that Disney World would see 6 million vacationers per year. Walt, Davis, and the rest of the Epcot team continued research throughout 1966, with Walt constantly coming up with new ideas for the city. Sometimes the radial plan was perfect and rigid. Other times it was depicted as a natural spiral, like a flower. On a factory tour with Davis, Walt saw a photoelectric sensor used to assist blind people. This gave Walt an idea, telling Davis, quote, "We'll have one little village that will have an underground trolley like they have in France. We won't have a motorman, except one of those
Watch the
devices.
video, okay.
This device will detect somebody in front and it will either slow down or stop the trolley." Walt was obsessed, and his team was inspired. Davis said, quote, "I spent weeks and weeks developing this plan that I thought was damn good. And maybe it was. Maybe Epcot was possible." A final person with
Be
insight
still?
to Epcot,
I don't know
and a
if I
person
can be
particularly
still. I'm
close
probably
with
gonna
Walt himself,
writhe
was
around a little
Imagineer
bit.
Marty Sklar. Sklar had first come to Disney in 1955.
My ass
to write
can't
for the
sit
Disneyland
still. It's
News
just not
newspaper
possible.
While he was still a student at UCLA, he soon worked his way into WED Enterprises, helping with attractions for the 1964 New York World's Fair, and becoming one of Walt's main writers for his presentations and on-screen appearances. Some refer to Sklar as the voice of Walt. Sklar had been close to the Florida project's development, and he was working on the photo plan of Epcot. He also got to see firsthand a changing Walt Disney. Throughout 1966, Walt's age was showing and his health was declining. He was not doing himself any favors. For a man designing an ideal community of people, he rarely socialized and spent most of his time at the studio working on Epcot. He drank more than he ever had. When he received
Yeah, me
formal
too,
dinner
buddy.
invitations, he would write large underlined no's in red ink on the page. He had few hobbies and seemed to be happiest when entertaining his grandchildren. Walt was quieter than usual.
Yeah, me
and
too,
was
buddy.
acting rather
I don't
strangely.
have
He
grandchildren.
frequently
That'd be
called the
pretty
in-house
funny, though, if I
songwriting
did,
duo, the
wouldn't it?
Sherman Brothers, to his office, demanding that they play him the Mary Poppins number, "Feed the Birds," always tearing up at the music.
Eat it
Why is
up,
unclear.
eat it
Walt might have been
up.
tired after all of those decades of work. Maybe he knew that his time was coming to an end and he was worried about his legacy. Or maybe he just liked the song. No matter, the Sherman Brothers sang, and Walt listened, staring out of his office window. The time spent drinking, or playing with his grandkids, or just thinking off into space were the breaks from a life otherwise dedicated to a single project: Epcot. Sklar noted that Disney's mind was
Epcot.
further from the studio and Disneyland than it had ever been. Sklar said, quote, "He'd already done everything he wanted to do in storytelling and creating motion picture entertainment in Disneyland." In the spring of 1966, Walt was in good spirits, traveling throughout the country meeting with companies to sponsor Epcot. Walt and his team met with nearly 100 major American corporations, most of which were interested in sponsoring the project. Walt also viewed interesting concepts that major cities were implementing, such as an interesting garbage recycling project in Tampa and new shopping malls in New York and Pennsylvania. But as the
Why is
plans
this guy just
progressed,
sitting in the
and
middle of
spring
the
gave way to
plant
summer, and then
aisle?
summer gave way to fall, ideation was turning into desperation. Buzz Price described Epcot as a project
That is a
created, quote,
big
"in the late
ass
stages of a
map.
man's
Holy
life, in a
shit.
hurry to do what he said he wanted to do, which is to leave 25 years of work for his organization. And that organization had concerns with Walt's proposal. Most pressing was Walt's insistence that he have complete control over the city. The team had been able to create the Reedy Creek Drainage District, a special district that gave Disney more powers to govern their land. And the team was courting the Florida legislature to create the Reedy Creek Improvement District, which would give Disney autonomy from nearly all local and county oversight. The efforts to establish autonomy from the various levels of government was only half of the battle. The other half was avoiding Epcot residents from self-governing. Walt wanted Epcot to have permanent residents. However, his attorneys pushed back on this idea, explaining that permanent residents would want to vote on matters related to the city and hold elected positions of power within Epcot. This was unacceptable. Walt felt that he knew what was best for his residents, and if they were able to vote, they could only make matters worse for his experimental community. Walt needed control, not just over Epcot, but the lives of his residents as well. The plans outlined for Epcot claimed that everything from appliances to light bulbs would be constantly refreshed with experimental technology, and it is implied that the residents would not have a choice as to whether or not they were testing out the products. Walt immediately shifted to the idea of having temporary rotating residents leasing property, with no one staying longer than 9 months. This would prevent Epcot from becoming a democracy. Instead, Walt's Epcot would be run not by the people or by the elite,
Walt
but by
taught it
Walt
democracy?
Disney alone.
Yeah.
He knew what was best for his people. It was his community,
Oh, the hell
first and
time.
foremost. The concerns raised by the attorneys prompted more discussion from within the team. Epcot was going to be both a functioning city
Seems like
and an
it. He
attraction
just
for
kind of went
visitors
with
to
it, didn't
Disneyland,
he?
a premise that brought up privacy concerns. Disney advisor Ray Watson pressed Walt on the issue, saying, quote, "Now you're not going to go out and get milk in your pajamas. You're going
What?
to have to dress up and put on a tie because these people that live there are now on exhibit." Watson continued, explaining, quote, "You need to decide whether you are indeed building a community that is a natural community where people will come, raise their families, form their own city
The
government,
community
grow, and
will
so forth.
what?
But if you're doing this as a place for an exhibit, then you need to separate that." On top of privacy concerns, the residents would lack basic freedoms, which some Imagineers saw as a non-starter for the project. Imagineer Carl Bongiorno said, quote, "Everyone knew that you couldn't have 25,000 people living in a community and constantly change, upgrade, move, innovate, go into people's homes, take out appliances, put new ones in, control everything about the project when you have a one-man, one-vote democracy." While the community in Epcot was under scrutiny, others doubted the prototype aspect, as companies were rarely interested in showing off products when they were in the development stage. Disney Imagineer John Hench brought up this concern. Hench recalled that Walt, quote, "didn't understand how jealous people are of keeping it secret and not exposing it." And then there was the issue of the T in Epcot, tomorrow. Tomorrow was always fast approaching, and as proved by Disneyland's Tomorrowland, it was expensive to keep up with the future. Walt's goal was for Epcot to always be 25 years ahead of its time, a costly proposition, if possible at all. These were the voices of dissent.
I don't remember
team.
this ever
Outside the
being
collaborative
like
bubble,
this.
Opinions toward the project were
I don't
much more
remember
cynical.
Epcot ever being like, I know it was like the
Animation
city of the
studio
future and
thought
all
the
that shit,
project
but
was
I
a
don't
terrible
remember it ever
idea,
being
possibly
like
because it was distracting Walt from
that
animation,
far
but
ahead.
also
What the
maybe
hell?
because it was just a terrible idea. Longtime friend of Walt, Ward Kimball, said, quote, "You can't experiment with people's lives." As with Palm Beach, Walt's brother Roy was wary of Epcot, and he was especially worried at its scale. But for many within the company and outside of it, Walt had earned the benefit of the doubt. No one believed that a feature-length animated film would be successful, and just as few thought
Epcot's
Walt could pull off a
stuff
project like
for me.
Disneyland. By this point,
Shut
everyone had
up.
learned their lesson. Do not underestimate Walt Disney. However, the proposition of Epcot was on an entirely different level.
Barco,
Epcot was unlike anything
hello.
ever imagined,
Hi,
except it
Barco.
also wasn't. At its core, the idea of a company constructing and owning a town full of citizens whose residency was dependent on their employment was not new. In 1884, industrialist George Pullman created
Barco,
Pullman,
the
a
sweetheart,
4,000-acre
he
town on the south side of
returns.
Chicago. With over 1,000 homes and
He
12,000
returns
residents,
to us.
Pullman was initially a huge success, thanks to its innovative design and
Mwah,
amenities.
mwah,
However,
mwah,
like the plans for
mwah,
Epcot,
mwah.
workers were only allowed to rent and were evicted if fired, and everything from saloons to libraries were at the full discretion of Pullman. Underlying issues came to a head after the economic downturn of 1894, and after only a decade, Pullman succumbed to a workers' strike. After government intervention, the strike turned violent, killing 30 people. Pullman was then annexed back into Chicago. In 1928, Henry Ford created a rubber factory and town named Fordlandia in the Amazon jungle, in which he tried to impose his personal ideals on indigenous workers.
You guys should watch the
dictating their
Wendigood
diet
video
and
on
banning
this.
alcohol, tobacco,
If you
and
haven't,
women to
you
increase
should.
productivity. Riots and strikes ensued, and ultimately, no rubber was manufactured. Company towns
Happy
such as these were
Weiss
once a
Wower
common practice,
Wednesday. I
especially for
agree.
long-term remote jobs such as mining. But these cities rarely lasted for long, especially under the ownership of a single company. Two of the most common reasons for the demise of a company town were lack of property ownership or the enforcement of a social ideology, both things that Epcot would have. Epcot was different from other company towns in many ways, but it was alarmingly similar, and it very well could have experienced the same unrest that other experimental towns did. If the historical examples of company towns were not concerning enough, then one could look to the Disney studio itself as a cautionary tale. It is true that Walt had not failed with his first feature film or with his theme park, but it could be argued that he had already tried and failed to build a community. The 1941 strike at the Disney studio occurred for many reasons, but most animators recalled that the moment that everything changed was when the company moved from the Hyperion to the Burbank studio. As aforementioned, Walt had designed the space himself, trying to anticipate
Okay, it
every
is.
need and accommodate each
Residents
individual.
have fucking
In
revolted
this,
against
he
Walt.
undoubtedly
Maybe.
failed.
I
Despite
don't know.
all of
What
Walt's
if they
planning and
couldn't?
Innovation, the new environment had none of the charm
What if
of
they
the previous
couldn't
studio,
revolt?
and the transition set the stage for tensions among the staff. There's a possibility that Epcot would have experienced the same problems. Walt felt he knew best. Best for his animators, best for his audience, and now best for his citizens. He had been right in the past, but he had also been very wrong. And as Epcot progressed, more doubters emerged with increasing merit. Walt briefly considered a
Who
merger with
knows?
GE, wondering if Epcot might
Wouldn't
work
that be
better in the hands of the
crazy?
company in the urban design space.
If
The merger could
GE
have also separated
was,
the project
or
from its
if GE
detractors at the
bought
studio,
out Disney
but
instead of
ultimately
Disney
nothing would
buying
come of these
everything
talks.
else out.
Sklar described the plans for Epcot as, quote, scene one. Walt was just getting started. Who knew how it was going to end up? It is difficult to scrutinize plans that are clearly preliminary and make a value or efficacy judgment.
We're
on them.
we're
Walt's
watching
1966 plans
the
for Epcot were surface
Defunct
level. He
Land
accounted for
video
the
on
citizens'
Epcot.
convenience and nothing more. There were little to no plans to
Which
deal
I
with
thought
any of the
Epcot
difficult or
was a
complex
very
issues that
recent
cities
thing, but it
face.
seems
In
it has
most
gone
cases,
back
the solution
a
would likely
long
been to expel them
time.
from the city. Walt said there would be, quote, no slum areas because we won't let them develop, which probably would have been true, as everyone needed to have a job, and if they didn't, they would have likely been evicted from the city. But this was not a scalable idea. In fact, Epcot as a whole would not have been replicable. The project was only viable because it was an attraction. The city's primary industry would have been tourism, so it needed to remain unique. Walt knew this, and he was not looking to build a perfect city that could be reproduced throughout the country, but rather an environment to test smaller ideas and technology. Davis said, quote, "It was his philosophy not to build a city that would solve all the urban problems all over the world, but to give a chance to American industry to experiment and show to the world just how the problems of traffic and housing could be solved." Still, even if Epcot was not intended to be utopia, many wondered how Disney would deal with human behavior. What would happen when a sponsor moved or laid off their workforce? Would this result in mass evictions? How would
They're
Epcot
just gonna
deal
have
with
to
the
suffer through
repercussions
it,
of a
Bodie
serious
boy.
crime, like murder? How would Disney handle racial integration and race relations?
Oh.
Any follow-up questions to the Epcot proposal did not have any answers. Despite the lack of depth and comprehensiveness, Walt was suddenly turning his attention from planning the city to announcing it. In the fall of 1966, Walt was racing to get as many of his Epcot ideas
Are you gonna
distributed as
stream
possible
today,
with
Knives?
unprecedented speed and determination.
Are you gonna
Epcot
are you
would
gonna
keep Disney
stream,
alive.
Knives?
It would be his legacy. It had to be. Walt confided in one employee, quote, "Fancy being remembered around the world for the invention of a mouse." Walt Disney was more. The world needed to remember him as more. He was showing his feelings now more than ever. On
If
one
you're gonna
occasion,
play,
Walt
you
pointed
should,
to a section
you
of
know.
an Epcot map, saying, quote, "This is where the park bench
We
will
should
be,
like
where Lily and
hang
I are
out
going
or
to
some
sit at
shit,
night
so I
and
could
watch
walk you
all the
through
people.
it. Wink, wink,
People
nudge,
that would
nudge.
be happy. People that would be a community. His community." In October of 1966,
Okay,
Walt
oh.
approached Marvin Davis
Damn, I
about
didn't know that'd
constructing
be
a model
easy.
of
I
the city.
thought I'd
He
have
asked
to
Scar
bribe you or
write a film
something.
explaining Epcot. The film was to star Walt, who would explain the purpose, ideals, and
Walt.
concepts of the Florida Project. There would be two films, both the same, barring their endings, in which Walt would address the audience directly, with one spiel being directed toward the Florida legislature and the other being directed toward corporations. Walt shot the film on October
What the fuck was
27,
that?
1966. He donned the Uncle Walt persona that
Amazing
he had grown to dislike
shoe.
over the years, the persona he feared would consume his legacy. But despite it being a character, it was a character that could sell, and sell he did.
And Epcot will always be a showcase to the world for the ingenuity and imagination
Recently
of
started.
American free
She
enterprise.
started
Gave an overview of
yesterday.
the Florida Project, as well as the plans for Epcot. In the background, an instrumental of the Carousel of Progress's theme song, "There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow," played. Sklar said that the film was, quote, "not just a sales job. Epcot was his blueprint, coming out of his head, a blueprint of what was on his mind." Before Walt introduced a narrated tour of the city concept, he stressed that these plans were still in their preliminary phases, and that they would change many times. And boy was he right.
Oh.
Just 3 weeks after filming the Epcot film, Walt was admitted to the hospital to undergo surgery to stop pain he had been having in his neck and leg. But the doctors found something much more concerning: spots and a lump on Walt's left lung. It was cancer. Those that knew Walt knew that he was a heavy smoker. The cause of the cancer was not surprising, but nothing could have prepared anyone for the death of Walt Disney. Walt was the least prepared of all, complaining that the
I
operation
wonder
would take
what it
time
must
away
have
from his
been
work
like
on
to be
Epcot.
alive
Before
during
he
the
went
death
in
of
for the
Walt
surgery,
Disney.
he yelled at Davis and VP Joe Potter, quote, "Why are you dragging your feet? Is it because of the money? Have you been talking to Roy? Roy thinks Epcot is a loser, but don't take any notice of him. Disney World will make all of the profits we need for this operation." On November 21st, after a seemingly successful surgery, Walt left the hospital early to return to the studio. Walt was in denial, claiming that he was ready to get back to work. Some of his staff were optimistic, others knew the truth. This would be the last day that Walt Disney visited his studio. On
Oh, no.
November 25th, Walt flew to his ranch in Palm Springs to rest, but just 5 days later, he flew back to Burbank and was admitted to the hospital right across the street from his studio. In what would ultimately be his deathbed, Walt continued his work. When his son-in-law, Ron Miller, a producer at the studio, visited him, Walt explained that when he got out of the hospital, he would leave the studio to Miller and other executives such as Card Walker and Don Tatum. Walt didn't have time for the studio anymore. He needed to focus on Epcot. It was the greatest thing that he would ever do, he told Miller. In the hospital, Walt would draw the 7th preliminary master plot plan of Disney World. He worked on it until the day before he died. When his brother Roy visited him in the hospital, Walt pointed to the tiled ceiling above his bed, using it as a grid for a blueprint that he traced with a finger. He said, quote, "Now there is where the highway will run. There is the route for the monorail." Walt Disney would die the next day, December 15th, 1966, just 10 days after his 65th birthday.
Hi, Jay. You got it.
The world properly mourned the loss of the entertainment giant, and his company was left with a media empire and 27,000 acres of nothing but scenery and statues. Davis approached Roy after Walt's
It's
passing,
crazy to
bringing with him
think
the most recent
Walt
plans for
Disney
Walt's
passed
experimental
away
city. After
in the
Davis
mid
presented Walt's final
60s. Like,
project, Roy simply said, quote,
what are we
Marvin,
at? 80
Walt's
years?
Dead. He need
No.
not say anything more. Walt Disney Productions would not build a city, especially
60
not with
years
that
away
Disney.
from his
Roy instead
company
invested all of the
owning
resources
just
into
about
bringing part of his
everything.
brother's dream to reality, the theme park and resort area. Roy presented the Epcot film for the first time on
That's wild.
February 2nd, 1967, to a group of officials in Winter Park, Florida. The Epcot city concept remained in conversation over the years, and was especially helpful in obtaining favorable political agreements, such as the Reedy Creek Improvement District, and other powers that may not have been granted to a theme park resort alone. Roy would rename Disney World to Walt Disney World to honor his brother. The resort opened with the Magic Kingdom theme park and 2 resort hotels. Epcot was nowhere to be found. However, elements were present, such as the Utilidors, a tunnel system on top of which the park was built,
Utilidor.
and
Do you
an
think that
AVAC
he'd be
garbage
proud of
collection
Disney?
system similar to the one that Walt
Maybe.
proposed. The map that Walt
Disney
drew was the
or
foundation
Walt
for the
was a
resort's
hard
plan,
ass.
and the contemporary hotel.
I wouldn't
one
be
of 2 Disney
surprised
World
if he
hotels
was
that Davis
proud
would
of
help
what it
design
is today.
Would resemble many of the Epcot renderings, both aesthetically and with its signature feature, a monorail. That
He
passed
might
through
even
the
be like
structure.
surprised
Walt Disney World
almost,
Resort
right?
opened on October 1st, 1971. Roy would pass less than 3 months later, on December 20th, 1971. Walt Disney Productions was left in the hands of Walt's son-in-law, Ron Miller, executives Card Walker and Don Tatum, as well as the countless other artists that had worked on the company's projects. These would be the people left to grapple with what would become of Epcot. If it wasn't to be a city, what would it be? The company kept putting it off, placing it in a second phase category that was 10 or so years away. It was not until 1974 that Disney president Card Walker confirmed that Epcot was going to happen, although it would be far different than a city, and thus Walt's dream, his final and most intense passion project, was officially dead. But what, as he often wondered, would become of his legacy in the wake of its cancellation? Walt's nephew Roy E. Disney once said, quote, "If you get 40 people in a room together and ask each one of them to write down who Walt was, you'd get 40 different Walts." It is impossible to define a person in a word, especially Walt
That's
Disney.
wild.
Walt was a simple man, and at the same time, he was a very complicated
He
one.
wanted so
He was a
much
futurist
different than
that
what
traded in nostalgia,
Epcot became.
a conservative, obsessed with progress, a gentle mentor with an impatient temper. Many of Walt's qualities and contradictions can be found in Epcot, but it does not make the picture any more clear. Maybe a single project cannot explain a person's life or hold their legacy. Maybe
It
to
can.
Walt, Epcot was about more than just legacy, or urban planning, or futurism. Why did Walt try so desperately for decades to build a community? Maybe Epcot was something that Walt lost, something that he wanted to get back. Walt Disney left behind a complicated legacy, and Epcot was just a piece in that puzzle, a missing piece.
Amen. Amen. God bless. Pray. Goddamn is right. Epcot is not what Disney imagined, but... Oh, wait, there's some more? Oh. We got... Oh, we got... Did I miss something? Come on. No? So Epcot today is nothing what Disney imagined it to be. Isn't that something? Fuck, man. Shit, that's fucking awesome. Well, thank you, Defunct Land, for that wonderful, wonderful walk through history and what Disney wanted it to be versus what it did eventually become. I am going to send you guys to Scarlet. I don't think I've sent you guys to Scarlet in a while, have I? If ever. So stick around if you don't mind. I will see you guys tomorrow for some doodly doodles. Hope you guys had a great day. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. I hope you guys have had a wonderful hump day. Good night, everybody. Wait. We got a minute to come up with something. We have a minute to come up with something. What is our chat message? What do we say? What do we say? Come on. Come on. We got 40 seconds to figure something out. Shit. Oh my god. What do we got? What we got? Lemon Squeezer Weezer? Lemon Squeezer Weezer it is. Let's do Lemon Squeezer Weezer. All right, Lemon Squeezer Weezer. All right, everybody, thank you for just stopping in. I love you all. Mwah, mwah. Most appreciated. I will see you guys tomorrow for our drawing stream. Good night, everybody. Goodbye. Say hi.